Serafina's povey. If someone had told me 3 months ago that I'd end up at a family amusement park with Kieran Blackthorne, I would have laughed them straight into the next moon cycle. And yet here I was, surrounded by shrieking laughter, spinning rides, and the sugary, buttery scents of cotton candy and popcorn, watching my ex-husband and our son argue over how many rounds they would go on the roller coaster. It was surreal, almost painfully so. This wasn't something I would have agreed to normally, but last night, after I answered Kieran's call, he'd sounded so soft, his voice lightened by something I couldn't name. And then he'd given me the best news I could have asked for. Daniel didn't need to return to the private island anymore. He could stay here with me indefinitely. I'd been so ecstatic on hearing the news that I hadn't even hesitated before saying yes to celebrating. Somehow, that had turned into this. A family outing. The first in ever, I think. Now, instead of giving myself over to the experience, I found myself debating the wisdom of my decision. Gods knew what Kieran and Celeste's relationship was like now, after what had happened, and Lucian and I still hadn't had a moment to sit down and talk. But Daniel's grin, the pure, unfiltered joy lighting up his whole face, made all those doubts quiet down. For him, I could endure anything. Kieran, on the other hand, looked infuriatingly at ease. He was wearing a navy and gray button-up shirt rolled casually at the sleeves. The wind continually swept through his hair, playing with his curly strands. He looked different, carefree, lighthearted. Meanwhile, I was here, overthinking everything, while he radiated a calm as deep as a monk's. The contrast irked me. So I resolved to be the same. I would stop worrying and just let things unfold. I could be carefree too, damn it. I turned my attention to Daniel, who was bouncing on his toes as the coaster came to a stop. "Mom, we're going twice. You should come too." I smiled, waving the ice cream cone he'd abandoned after one lick. "I think I'll sit this one out, sweetheart. Someone has to make sure your ice cream doesn't melt." In truth, my ribs were taking their sweet time recovering, and every move hurt. But I didn't let it show. I refused to be a dampener on my son's perfect day. He grinned, satisfied enough, and tugged his dad toward the roller coaster line. Kieran glanced back at me, and our eyes met for one quick second before he looked away. It was nothing. Could barely be described as eye contact. Still, I had to immediately lower myself onto a bench thanks to my wobbly knees. I refused to read too much into my reaction and focused on them. Father and son, laughing, teasing each other, having a blast. I held my thoughts in check for all of 6 seconds before they went off leash, taking me back to last night. The matching outfits, the playful harmony in the car. And now, for a fleeting delusional second, I could almost believe the divorce never happened. We were still married, but happily. The past 10 years were nothing but a bad dream. I hadn't cried myself hollow on several nights. My husband only ever had eyes for me. I knew it was an illusion. I knew it was silly. I knew I should stop before the quiet ache shifted, first into longing, then into a hope that would devastate me. Yet, "Excuse me," a voice said softly, saving me from my thoughts. I turned. A she-wolf stood hesitantly nearby, clutching a stroller. Her eyes were bright, nervous. "I'm sorry, are you Serafina Blackthorne? The LST champion?" My first thought was that she had the wrong person. My second thought was, holy shit, that's me. The smile I gave her probably looked incredulous. "Yes, I am." Her face lit up with awe. "Oh, goddess, I can't believe it's really you. Would you mind if I took a picture? You've inspired me more than I can say." The sincerity and awe in her tone filled my chest with warmth. "Of course," I said, rising. She pulled out her phone for the photo. I stepped beside her, smiling to myself when I noticed her hand trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered after the click. "Oh, it's nothing." "No," she shook her head, a wisp of hair falling over her eyes. "I mean, for everything, for your story." My brows knit as she tucked the strand of hair behind her ear, continuing, "I was married off to forge pack alliances, and my husband—" Her eyes suddenly filled with tears, and she blinked furiously to keep them at bay. "He wasn't kind. He hurt me a lot." My stomach clenched violently. For all Kieran's shortcomings, he never once raised his hand against me. And I knew that was the bare minimum, but I would always be grateful for the surety I had that he would never hurt me. The ashar in the snowfield arena did not count. I used to think I'd never get out," the woman continued, her voice thick with emotion. I stayed because I knew I couldn't go back to my old pack, and I thought no one would accept me or my child if I left. But then I was at the charity gala where you gave your first speech. It really moved me. Since then, I started following your story. Her voice wavered, and a tear finally slipped down her cheek. It gave me courage unlike anything else. I filed for divorce last month. I got a small apartment for rent with my savings, and I'm going to join OTS. My throat went dry. That's incredible, I managed, genuinely. You're so brave. She shook her head quickly, wiping the tears. No, you are. You showed me that even when the world takes everything, we can rebuild our lives. Thank you, Sarah. I was speechless. Dumbstruck, the only thing I could do was pull her into a hug and fight a groan when she squeezed me tightly enough to break my bruised ribs. Long after she left, I stood there, staring at the space she'd occupied. The sounds of the park rushed back around me, music, laughter, the clang of machinery. But my thoughts were miles away. My story. Everything I'd gone through had given someone the power to leave her abuser and turn her life around. If Kieran and I hadn't gotten divorced, would I have joined OTS? Would I have worked my ass off to get stronger? Would I have found the courage and tenacity to lead my team to victory? Would I have ever become this paragon? No. I glanced at the dripping cone in my hand, then at the ride. Kieran and Daniel had climbed off, both flushed and beaming. For a moment, the contrast between past and present was almost dizzying. The shirt Kieran wore was unfamiliar. It wasn't one of the ones I used to fold neatly into drawers, desperately inhaling his scent because I was so starved for attention. And that alone said enough. We weren't who we'd been before. He wasn't mine, and I wasn't his. We'd never really belonged to each other in the first place. We were just Daniel's parents now. It was just like I'd said to Kieran all that time ago at the park. If he could learn to respect my new life, I could learn to respect his. And we could peacefully co-parent without hurting each other. That had to be enough. Still, as they came closer, Kieran's eyes caught mine with an unspoken pull that didn't do good things for my resolve. This time, when my knees wobbled, I locked them in place. "Did we make you wait too long?" he asked, voice threaded with warmth. "Not at all." I smiled at Daniel, careful not to meet Kieran's gaze too long. "You both looked like you were having fun." Daniel grinned. His cheeks flushed. "It was so cool, Mom." "Here," Kieran said, reaching out for the ice cream cone. "This is all melted. Let's get another." As his hand wrapped around the ice cream cone, his fingers brushed mine, and we both froze. A spark shot through me, so sudden it nearly made me drop the cone. Heat flared under my skin, raw and alive. I heard a whimper. In my mind, restless and needy. "Alina?" There was silence. "Alina," I pushed. "Are you okay? What was that?" "Nothing." Her tone was startled, unlike her usual composure. I could practically feel her fidgeting. I blinked, trying to steady my breath, to will away the tremor that still lingered between my fingers. When I looked up, Kieran was staring at me too, eyes dark, stormy, confused. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us looked away. And then Daniel tugged his father's hand excitedly. "Dad, there's the bumper cars. Can we go?" The tension broke like glass. Kieran cleared his throat, withdrew his hand. "Sure, bud, go ahead, we'll catch up." Daniel darted ahead, blissfully unaware. But I could feel Kieran's gaze still on me, concentrated and burning as sunlight through a magnifying glass. "Serafina," he started, voice barely above the noise. Did you feel that?" "I'm not sure I know what you mean." I cut in gently, proud of myself when my voice didn't shake. I wasn't lying. I didn't know what he meant. Because I didn't know what that was, but I would be damned if I investigated. Kieran hesitated, his jaw flexing. I could see the war in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to push, to know, fighting the part that finally understood that he wasn't entitled to anything that concerned me. For a second, I thought he'd let it go, but then he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and rain wind, close enough that I was terrified he would hear the sound of my heart thundering. "Do you ever think," he murmured, voice roughened, "that maybe this is how things should have been?" I stared at him, stunned. Why the fuck would he ask me that? "Don't do that," I rasped. "Do what?" My words came out sharper than I intended. "Don't read into anything. This is just a day out with our son, nothing more. Who cares how things should have been? This is how they are now." His throat bobbed. Right. But the way he said it told me he didn't believe it. Not entirely. He reached for my hand again, deliberate, sure, as if he'd decided that clarity was worth any consequence. A small, involuntary sound escaped me, half a breath, half a warning. I didn't know what I would do if he touched me, and that spark flared again. I held my breath just as his fingers grazed mine. "Mom, Lucian's here!" The ludicrous sentence snapped me back to reality. I turned, startled, and sure enough, there he was. Lucian stood a few paces away next to Daniel, a lazy half-smile curving his mouth, his hands tucked casually in his coat pockets. His gaze flicked from me to Kieran, and that smile hardened. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said smoothly. I blinked twice, but the image didn't disappear. "How did you know?" He waved my question away before I could complete it. "I made dinner reservations for us," Lucian announced, eyes gleaming. "A private celebration, if you will. Is that okay?" Daniel's face brightened instantly. "For all of us?" Lucian glanced at Kieran again, and I didn't miss the tightening around his eyes. "Well, I don't know if your father—" "That's fine," Kieran cut in. I could feel his energy shifting, cooling, withdrawing. His hands were firmly by his side. "I'll sit that out, thank you." They shared a look that made me feel like a bone between two alpha dogs. Lucian offered his hand to Daniel. "Come on, champ, there's a table waiting with your name on it." Daniel grabbed it happily. "Bye, Dad. You'll come next time, right?" Kieran's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sure, buddy. Have fun." Lucian looked at me expectantly. "Sarah?" I blinked. "Yeah, sure. Let's go." For some reason, my feet were heavy as we walked away, and when I stopped to dump the melted ice cream into a trash can, it took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to glance back. But it didn't matter that I didn't look. I could feel Kieran's gaze lingering, like the last trace of a storm that hadn't decided whether to fade or return. Lucian's pov. Dinner was supposed to be easy. A quiet, celebratory meal after a long couple of weeks, something that might bridge the subtle distance I had sensed between Sarah and me. The restaurant's lighting was soft, golden, warm, the kind designed to buffer harsh edges. Gentle music played in the background, and the low murmur of conversation filled the air. The scent of roasted herbs lingered, mingling with the clink of cutlery and the flicker of candles, giving the whole place an easy, inviting calm. But none of that could hide the restlessness in Sarah's eyes, and as I watched her from across the table, I realized I had my work cut out for me. Steak and potatoes weren't a strong enough bridge. The last couple of times I'd eaten out with her, she'd been ravenous due to her rigorous training schedule. Now, though, she hadn't touched much of her food, just prodded at it absent-mindedly, her thoughts clearly miles away. Daniel was seated beside her, digging into his food with the enthusiasm she lacked and talking animatedly about the amusement park and all the rides he and Kieran went on. Every few sentences, Sarah smiled and murmured something appropriate, but I could see the tension pinching the muscles at her jaw, each fake laugh a little too brittle. Dinner with Sarah was light, fun, comfortable, warm, not this. Finally, I set my utensils down. "You don't like the food?" I asked lightly, though my voice came out rougher than intended. Her head lifted. For a heartbeat, her expression was blank, like she'd forgotten where she was. Then she blinked and shook her head. "No, it's fine, really. I think I'm just tired." A lie, and a poor one at that. I leaned back in my seat, studying her. The faintest flush rose on her cheeks under my scrutiny. "You sure?" Her eyes flickered to Daniel and then back to me. "Positive," she said quickly. "I just need a minute." She pushed back her chair and stood. "Excuse me." She didn't wait for a response before walking away. I watched her retreat toward the restroom, her steps surer than when we'd first met. Every instinct in me wanted to go after her, but I held back. I knew it was too soon to tell, definitely, but it was undeniable that something had shifted since the trials ended. She'd always been reserved, a little careful and withdrawn, but she'd begun to loosen up around me, smiling more easily, teasing, letting her laughter slip through unguarded. But now the warmth she used to show me had cooled, replaced by this polite, distant kind of civility that I didn't know what to do with. "Lucian?" Daniel's small voice broke my thoughts. I turned to find him staring at me curiously, spoon of mashed potatoes in hand. "Yes?" "You're thinking really loud," he said seriously, and I almost laughed despite myself. I nodded gravely. Mom does that too sometimes. He shook his head. Adults think a lot. Right. I cleared my throat. So how was your day today? What was the amusement park like? Daniel snorted. So that's it. My brows lifted. What do you mean? He shrugged, shoving the spoon into his mouth. After he swallowed, he said, You want to know if something happened between my mom and dad today, don't you? I froze. What makes you think that? I've been talking about the amusement park all night, so you don't want to hear more about that. I let out a soft huff of air, leaning back in my seat. You're perceptive for your age. Daniel shrugged. I sense things. I felt the corner of my lips quirk up. Daniel really was a marvel. I was sure that when people looked at him, they attributed his remarkableness to Kieran. But I knew the truth. I knew whose bloodline fed the strength and intuition young Daniel possessed. All right then, I said, half amused, half wary. So tell me, how was the park today? His grin faltered slightly. It was awesome, really. He fidgeted with his spoon. But Mom didn't go on many rides with Dad and me, and she looked, well, like you. He shrugged, like she was thinking too much. The words tugged at something sharp inside me. I see. But, he continued, meeting my gaze again, if you're trying to find out if something weird happened between them, you can just ask her yourself. I blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness. Excuse me? Grandpa says grown-ups waste time by pretending not to care when they actually do, Daniel said matter-of-factly. You like her. That's not a secret. If you think there's something off between you two, then face it head-on before it's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath until I exhaled slowly. You're unusually insightful. He tilted his head. I'm just saying you should talk to her. Pretending everything is fine doesn't fix it. A humorless smile curved my lips. You sound like someone much older than 9. He shrugged and scooped another spoonful of mashed potatoes. I feel much older than 9. Before I could respond, Daniel leaned forward, his tone turning serious again. I'll tell you something, Lucian, he said quietly. I'll always stand on my mom's side, always. All I want is for her to be happy. So if you ever hurt her, I won't forgive you. His dark eyes narrowed, and for a moment I was back at the bar staring down Kieran. And I'll hurt you back. For a moment I just looked at him. His small face, his steady gaze, the calm, grounded strength that could not be taught. I could see the future in him, the power, the resolve, the natural authority that would one day make werewolves and humans alike bow their heads in respect. You're going to be a great alpha someday, I said finally, my voice lower, more earnest than I'd planned. Daniel's chest puffed out a little, a proud smile breaking through the tension on his face. Of course, I'm going to make Mom proud. I won't let her down. I smiled faintly. Good. Then we have something in common. He blinked. Huh? I don't plan to let her down either. That earned me a thoughtful look, skeptical maybe, but not unfriendly. Then after a pause, he extended his hand toward me in a closed fist. Promise? My hand hovered halfway before I froze. The gesture was so simple, so childlike, and yet it knocked the air from my lungs. Because it wasn't just a child's promise. It was something Zara used to do. The same playful oath she'd insisted on when we were younger, when we were building the future out of our shared dreams. Before everything. Daniel frowned slightly, shaking his fist lightly. You're supposed to bump it. My throat tightened. I know. It wasn't special. A fist bump was one of the most common gestures ever. Yet. That was when Sarah's voice cut in, gentle, lilting, but with that soft command she didn't even realize she had. What are you two conspiring about? We both looked up. She stood at the edge of the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. There was less tension in the lines of her body, but her gaze darted between us with faint suspicion. Daniel grinned. We were making promises. She raised an eyebrow. Promises? Yep. He turned to me and stage whispered, he was about to promise not to break your heart. Daniel, Sarah chided, her tone half amused, half mortified. I couldn't help it. I laughed. That's accurate enough. Her eyes flicked to me, her expression uncharacteristically guarded, as she slid back into her seat. You two have been bonding, I see. I'm learning valuable lessons, I replied lightly. Your son is an exceptional conversationalist. She sighed, but her lips curved slightly despite herself. I can only imagine what kind of lessons those were. Dinner continued after that. though the tension between us hummed quietly beneath the surface. The drive back was quiet for a while. Exhausted after his eventful day, Daniel dozed in the back seat, his head tipped against the window. The silence was filled with my thoughts, looping endlessly between what-ifs and regrets, gathering like a storm I could no longer outrun. And when I pulled up to Sarah's driveway, I decided that I wouldn't wait a second longer. It was now or never. The engine was still idling when I turned to her. "Can we talk?" To my surprise, she didn't hesitate. I was going to ask the same thing. I left the engine and AC on as we stepped out stealthily, careful not to wake Daniel, and made our way toward her porch. We sat on the step just close enough that our clothes brushed together and I could feel her warmth. The night was quiet, save for the hum of crickets and the low rumble of my engine. The distant glow of city lights bled into the sky, but a smattering of stars was still visible. It was a beautiful night, and I wished more than anything that we didn't need to have this difficult conversation. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, though it was a warm night. I hesitated, my eyes skimming over her outline like I was memorizing her. "You've been distant, more than usual. I can't tell if it's because of the trials or something I've done." She sighed softly. "It's not about what you've done, Lucian. It's about what you haven't said." My pulse kicked up. "Meaning?" Her voice lowered, calm but sharp. "Meaning you've been keeping something from me." She turned to me then, and nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "About your mate. Lucian's peau vive." My spine instinctively stiffened. There was a roaring in my ears, a thundering in my chest. The two sensations crashed together, loud, relentless. I could barely think around the noise. I could feel the faint vibration of the car's idle hum, see the low beam of the headlights spilling across the driveway, but my thoughts were nowhere near the present. They'd splintered backward, years backward, to a time when the world made sense, when my heart was whole. "Shh, how did you know?" I didn't move, didn't even breathe, until Sarah's voice, quiet, almost trembling, came again. "I suspected," she said. "The way you got when we talked about mates, and again when you told me about your friend who gave you the formula for the moondew nectar. And then I heard it, plain and simple, from mouths at OTS." I closed my eyes. A long, steady exhale left me. I should have known it would be inevitable. I should have told her first. I should have never hidden it from her. I should have. "Sarah, I wish I didn't have to hear it from someone else," she cut in, her tone sharper now. "I wish you'd just told me." The air between us thickened. Crickets filled the silence, their rhythmic hum syncing with the uneven beat of my pulse. I turned toward her, finally forcing myself to meet her gaze. The faint glow of the headlights painted her profile in soft light. And gods, the hurt in her eyes gutted me. "You're right," I admitted quietly. "You deserve to hear it from me. My voice trailed off as I raked a hand over my face. "I didn't want to affect your focus before the championship. You were already under immense pressure. I didn't want to risk clouding your state of mind." The flimsy excuse sounded even weaker aloud than in my head. "Lucian," she said softly, "we've known each other long before the competition. What happened to all those times we had dinner, all the talks we had, when you asked me to be your girlfriend?" Her words hit deep. Worst of all was that she wasn't accusing me. She was wounded, and she had every right to be. "I shared parts of myself with you that I haven't shared with anyone else," she went on, the softness of her voice not hiding the sting of her words. "And you just held back." Guilt blazed in my chest. I'd thought I was protecting her. But the truth was simpler, uglier. I'd been protecting myself from reopening a wound that had never fully healed. "I'm sorry," I murmured. It was weak, pathetic, but it was all I could manage. Before I could say anything more, a small voice broke through the heaviness. "Mom?" Sarah immediately shifted, her entire demeanor softening as she went into mom mode. "I'm here, baby." I rose from the steps as Daniel pushed open the car door, rubbing at his eyes, and she went to him. "Are we home?" he yawned. "Yes, my love," she answered, brushing his hair back from his face. "It's late," I said, moving around to open the driver's door. "We should continue this tomorrow. Just us." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "All right." She didn't look at me again as she led her son up the porch steps and into the house. I stood there long after the door closed, my reflection warped in my car's darkened glass. and I wished tomorrow wouldn't come. When Sarah walked into the reception hall of OTS the following afternoon, every nerve in my body went on high alert. Her expression was careful, neutral, like she'd built a wall overnight and dared me to scale it. I couldn't bring myself to speak. I couldn't think of any words that would be appropriate. Instead, I slowly extended my hand towards hers, and to my relief, she took it. OTS was still buzzing with the aftermath of the LST, alive with noise, trainees moving between halls, laughter spilling from open windows, the grunting sound of sparring coming from the private rooms. But we didn't speak a word as we walked, both of us ignoring the attention we garnered. Eventually, the hum of the campus faded behind us as we crossed into the quieter annex at the far end. The walk wasn't long, but it might as well have been miles. Every step felt like walking on a tightrope. And we hadn't even gotten to the hard part yet. When we finally stopped, Sarah looked up and recognition flickered in her eyes. The OTS Historical Exhibition Hall. "This isn't just an explanation," I said quietly. "You deserve to understand the whole story. And the best place to tell it was here, among ghosts and old beginnings." Inside, the hall was quiet, sunlight slanting through the high windows, dust motes turning in the air like slow snow. She'd been here before, when I initially gave her a tour OTS. Back in the beginning, before I knew who she really was and what she would come to mean to me. Her gaze skimmed the displays like they had that day, but now I watched her pay attention. Watched her gaze linger, not on the accolades or weapons or charts, but on the smaller human details, the photographs, the faded notebooks, the first blueprints of our compound. When we reached the far wall, I stopped. The portrait hung half-hidden behind a gauze curtain, the edges yellowed with age. But there she was, as beautiful as the first day I laid eyes on her. Zara, fierce blue eyes, her favored braid crown that made her look like a warrior princess, the smile that dared the world to underestimate her. Sarah didn't ask who she was. She didn't need to. "Her name was Zara," I said softly. Even after all these years, saying her name aloud felt like invoking a ghost. It stirred something raw in me, a maelstrom of love and pain and guilt and grief and regrets and bone-crushing longing. We met in the Southern Territories. The words came out steadier than I felt, and I hoped that stability would carry on until I said what I needed to. "I was traveling for research then," I continued, "gathering data for what would become OTS's combat framework. I'd heard rumors of a pack with unusual training methods. Thought I could just stroll into their territory and observe." A humorless laugh escaped me. I was overconfident. Sarah's lipped slightly. "Let me guess, it didn't go according to plan." "Not remotely." I smiled despite myself. I barely got 2 steps past the border before she pounced on me. Her eyebrows lifted. "Pounced?" Quite literally. I could still feel the shock of that moment, her weight, her speed, her ferocity. She thought I was a trespasser. 1 second I was explaining my credentials, the next I was flat on my back with her knee on my chest. Sarah stifled a laugh. "That's one way to make an introduction." And what an introduction it was. I could still summon the image when I closed my eyes. The sun had been setting, and the orange and peach hues of the sunset haloed her face, making her look more mythical than human. It had been a shot of lightning straight to my heart. "She wasn't sorry either," I said. When I told her who I was, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Then maybe don't sneak into someone else's training grounds, Professor." Sarah's laughter came soft and warm, and for a moment the tension between us loosened just a little. "Sounds like she wasn't easily impressed." "She wasn't," I said, my smile fading into something more tender. And that's what drew me to her, even before the bond clicked. She was bold, fearless, the kind of person who didn't wait for the world to make room for her. She made her own. My voice wavered when I spoke again. She extended a formal invite to her pack. Her father was Alpha, and she was the youngest of 7. Always had something to prove. "She must have related to your vision," Sarah murmured. "She did. She was used to being overshadowed, so the idea of an organization where merit and skill took precedence over birthright was a dream come true for her. We clashed constantly, training methods, strategy, philosophy, but beneath it all, we were mirrors of each other. For every argument we had, we found twice as many things we agreed on. She believed strength wasn't inherited, it was cultivated. That power was earned. That's what sparked the idea for OTS. Sarah inhaled softly. It was her idea? She used to call it a sanctuary for strays, I said, smiling faintly. A place where wolves without packs could rebuild themselves, where talent wouldn't be wasted just because of bloodline. Talking about our dream aloud hurt more than I expected. She left her pack. I'd already left mine. Together, we built the first version of Shadowvale. My throat tightened. We thought we had time. We thought the future stretched ahead of us, bright and glorious. What happened to her? Sarah asked quietly. Till today, I don't remember what it was about. But I drew in a breath that didn't quite reach my lungs. Fuck, it wasn't even a fight. It was just a silly disagreement, and she stormed out. The weight of memory descended on me. I wish I could at least remember what had made us so mad, so angry that she'd stormed out, and I'd been too miffed to go after her. If I'd known, gods, if I'd known. The words lodged like stones in my throat, but I pushed through and pushed them out. She was ambushed by a group of traffickers who hunted wolves for sport. I sensed her peril instantly, and Zara held her own long enough for me to reach her and fight them off. But I stopped, agony winding through me, turning my blood into ice. I reached her just in time to hold her as she died, I said quietly. And she didn't even think about herself. She made me promise to finish what we started. I closed my eyes, and I was back in that cold, dark alley. The warmth of my mate against me, the sound of her heartbeat slowing down with each shallow breath, the sticky warmth of her blood as it pooled around us, the rasp in her voice as she weakly held out her fist. Promise me, she'd whispered, using the last of her breath. Promise me you'll keep our dream alive, you'll see it become something. And she'd stopped breathing. The room felt smaller then, the air denser, the faint hum of the lights above was the only sound left, that and the sound of my heart breaking all over again. I blamed myself. I found the strength to continue. For months afterward, I couldn't function. I wanted to burn it all down, but I shook my head. I'd made her a promise. So I built OTS from her ashes, with Maya's help, with the help of others who believed in the dream, and eventually, it wasn't about me anymore, or even her. It became about everyone who walked through those doors. I turned towards Sarah. She looked like she was holding her breath. It took 10 years, I said. 10 years to build something worthy of her name. But it's no longer just mine or hers. It's ours. Every trainer, every student, every person who refuses to be defined by where they started. I hesitated, then added quietly, including you. You mean that? She asked softly. I nodded. You've become one of the pillars of OTS, Sarah, I said. Everything you've achieved, it's what Zara would have wanted to see. She would be so proud. Sarah didn't reply, but I could see it, the flicker in her eyes. Understanding, ache, compassion, but something else too. Distance. It was subtle, the way her shoulders drew in, the way her gaze softened but didn't quite reach me anymore. Like a door was closing, slowly, silently, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. And there, in the hall built on ghosts and dreams, I realized something quietly terrifying. The truth had done the opposite of what I had needed it to do. It had pushed Sarah away, Serafina's Pove. It's what Zara would have wanted to see. She would be so proud. Gods, it was worse than I'd thought. I had braced myself for something difficult, but this tragic tale of love and loss shook me in a way I hadn't anticipated. I stared at the portrait, something cold twisting along my spine. Zara, gods, even her name was beautiful, had fierce, intelligent blue eyes and a defiant smile. Pale blonde hair framed her face in a braid crown, and her hand rested on the hilt of a blade. I could envision her from the stories Lucian had told. Fierce, dauntless, radiant in every sense of the word. The kind of woman who drew every eye when she entered a room without even trying, whose light outshone everything around her. Kind of like Celeste, but worthy. And even as Lucian spoke of Zara, softly, reverently, I could see that same light still reflected in him, like a candle that refused to go out, no matter how much time passed. He didn't cry. Lucian wasn't the kind of man who broke easily, but the way his breath shuddered, the way his frame stiffened like it was taking all his willpower to hold himself together, the way his voice faltered around her name, told me everything. Zara wasn't gone from him. Not really. She was the echo between his heartbeats, the ghost haunting every silence. And somehow, I was supposed to live with that. I tried to smile, but it felt like pressing cracked glass together and pretending it would hold. She sounds unreal, daunting, remarkable. My voice came out smaller than I intended. She was, Lucian agreed. You must have loved her a lot. More than anything in the world. Lucian's gaze softened, the faintest flicker of guilt flashing through it. Sarah, he exhaled slowly, I never meant to hide her from you. There was no hiding the accusation in my tone. Then why did you? A muscle in his jaw ticked, and his eyes darted back and forth like he was searching for the answer. You didn't trust me to handle the truth, I answered for him when nothing was forthcoming. You didn't think I could have respected your love for her. No, Sarah, I didn't. He shook his head. I just didn't want her shadow to color how you saw me. I didn't want you to see yourself as a replacement. The word hung between us, as heavy and imposing as Zara's portrait. I turned back to the picture, taking in her pale hair, the same color as mine, the blue in her eyes, same shade as mine. You'll forgive me if I find that hard to believe, I said, my words barely above a whisper. Sarah, I turned to him. You expect me to believe you never looked at me and saw her? I shook my head, running over every interaction with Lucian from the day we met. There was always something different in the way you looked at me. It always felt like you're searching for something familiar. He inhaled, deep and steady. Sarah, I swear to you, I never once looked at you and saw Zara. I saw you, he insisted. I scoffed. Then why didn't you tell me about her? From the beginning? Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. He looked away first, because I knew what it would do, he finally admitted. You'd have stepped back, built a wall, you'd have kept your distance. He added dejectedly, like you're doing now. I couldn't refute that, not if I was being honest with myself, because I could feel myself withdrawing, feel my defenses rising. Lucian's eyes met mine, determined and devastatingly open. I didn't want you to keep your distance. I didn't want to just be your friend forever. I wanted you, Sarah, as my partner, my Luna, just like Zara would have been. My pulse stuttered. The bluntness of his words stole the air from my lungs. Lucian, he took a step closer, his voice rougher now. You want honesty? Fine. I did have selfish reasons for getting close to you, but not the kind you think. I frowned. What do you mean? The day of Edward's funeral wasn't the first time I saw you, he confessed quietly. It was months before that, at a charity gala for an orphanage. One of the children was huddled in a corner, separated from the rest. And you went to her, offered her a slice of cake, talked to her, made her smile. At that time, I didn't know your name or who you were, but I couldn't stop watching you. You were gracious, compassionate. I blinked, stunned. I barely remembered the gala he was talking about. It was one of the many events where I'd been cast aside. I'd seen the little girl across the room and been reminded of myself. You remember that? I remember everything about you, Sarah. He said it so simply that I almost missed the weight of it. Later, he continued, when I realized who you were, when I invited you to join OTS, it wasn't pity or strategy. I wanted to understand what it was about you that stayed with me, and then I did. Every day since, I've seen something new. Your fire, your determination, your loyalty. You made me want again, Sarah. My heart thudded painfully, and yet you didn't tell me any of this. He exhaled slowly, because I thought telling you would ruin it, that you'd see me as manipulative. He shrugged almost defeatedly. Maybe I was. I knew a long time ago that a second-chance mate wasn't in the cards for me, and I meant what I told you a while back, Sarah. You are my choice. I wanted to believe him. Gods, I wanted to. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zara's ghost standing between us. Beautiful, untouchable, invincible. Maybe Lucian was right to keep her existence hidden from me. Because, just like he'd predicted, her shadow loomed. I could feel it coloring every interaction Lucian and I ever had. When he saved me at my father's funeral, was he thinking of the battle when he hadn't been able to save her? When he invited me to join OTS, was it because my presence in its halls would feel like Zara's? How often did he look at me and think of Zara? Did he ever compare us? How much of what he'd said to me was meant for Zara? How much of what we'd done was déjà vu for him? I swallowed. Now was probably the worst time to ask this question, but at this point, I was grasping at straws. Do you love me? Yes, he answered without missing a beat. My chest clenched. Fuck. That was supposed to be it. That was supposed to blast every doubt out of my mind, soften my resolve, but his answer tangled with disbelief into a tight knot sitting in my chest. How could he possibly mean it? After Zara, perfect, luminous, fearless Zara, how could someone like me even measure up? You don't make sense. I didn't know if it was my whole body trembling or just my voice. You talk about Zara like she was the center of your world, and then you look at me and say you love me. How can both be true? Lucian's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. Because the heart doesn't work logically, he said finally. I loved her. That's true. But that doesn't mean my love for you is smaller or weaker. It's just different. That word tasted bitter. It doesn't feel different, I whispered. I feel like I'm standing in someone else's shadow. He reached for me before I could pull away, his hands brushing my arms with almost reverent care. Because you don't see yourself clearly yet, he said. If you did, you'd know there's no shadow that could dim your light, Sarah. He'd always been good at that, saying exactly what I needed to hear. How many of my warm, encouraging speeches had been recycled from his relationship with Zara? Lucian, I said softly, stepping back, you say you love me, but love isn't the same as needing someone to fill an empty space. He froze. That's not what this is. Isn't it? I asked. You loved Zara because she was bright, courageous, whole. You love me because I'm, what? A survivor? Someone you can protect, a new project, a consolation prize, a purpose to make you feel alive again? That's not fair, he said, voice tightening. Maybe not, I murmured. But you know the kind of life I've lived. You know that I spent a decade married to someone who longed for another. How is this any different? The only sound between us was the hum of the exhibition hall's air conditioning and the faint echo of voices from another room. The lights overhead painted the marble floor in soft, sterile reflections. It felt wrong that we were standing in a place meant to preserve history, while mine and his was quietly collapsing. Lucian scrubbed a hand over his face, his composure cracking. Sarah, I can't undo the past. I can't change the fact that I loved Zara, but I'm here now, with you. Isn't that what matters? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to step into his arms, to pretend the ache in my chest was just another fear I could conquer. But loved, I shook my head, is in the wrong tense. You still love her. Perhaps you always will. Lucian flinched, but his lack of response was a response enough. I swallowed hard. You're asking me to share a heart that's split in two, Lucian. I've done that before. I refuse to do it again. His eyes searched mine, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable even. Then what do you want me to do? He asked quietly. I hesitated, then said, give me time. His lips parted, but no words came. Just silence. The kind that felt like standing on a ledge, looking down, knowing one wrong move could end everything. I need to think, I continued, my voice softer now, to decide if this is something I can live with. He nodded slowly, though his jaw was tight enough to crack. And if you decide you can't? My heart thudded painfully. Then we'll both have to live with that too. Lucian took a slow step toward me, then another, until we were close enough that his breath blew wisps of my hair. His voice dropped to a low murmur I felt more than heard. I meant what I said, Sarah. I love you, not because you remind me of her, but because when I look at you, I see the future I want, the future I've always wanted. My chest constricted so tightly I could barely breathe. How can you face the future when the past still has such a strong hold on you? At the back of my mind, I was aware that I sounded borderline hypocritical. Divided hearts, tug of wars between the past and future. I wasn't even sure which one of us I was talking about anymore. Gods, it was all so messy. The quiet stretched again. The faint sounds of the exhibition, distant footsteps, muted voices, became almost unbearably loud. I forced myself to look up at him one last time. Lucian, I said, barely above a whisper, I need space. Please. Something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, restraint, maybe both. He exhaled long and hard, like he was forcing himself to let go. All right, he said finally. If that's what you need. I nodded once, firmly, and then he was gone. I stood there long after the sound of his footsteps faded, staring at the spot where he'd been. The atmosphere in the hall wrapped around me, dense and cold. And then I raised my head to look at Zara's portrait. Her eyes seemed to lock onto mine, cerulean on cerulean. It was like looking through a warped mirror at a version of myself I would never be. This is what Lucian saw when he looked at me. I was sure of it. I pressed my hand to my chest, half expecting to feel something burning there, jealousy, anger, heartache. Instead, there was only stillness, Serafina's povie. The short drive home felt endless. The city lights blurred through the car window, gold and silver against the dark glass. The hum of the tires was steady but distant. My thoughts, however, were anything but steady. I couldn't stop thinking about my conversation with Lucian, about how every man I'd ever loved seemed to have loved someone else first. My ex-husband loved my sister, and now my boyfriend's heart still belonged to another woman. It felt like fate was mocking me. The same cruel story, woven again and again. Different characters, same ending. Kieran with Celeste, Lucian with Zara, Sarah left on the outside, longing for hearts that would never wholly be hers. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Was that all I was destined for? To live in the shadows of women men couldn't forget? "You're stronger than that," Alina's voice murmured in the quiet of my mind. Her tone wasn't soft exactly. It was the kind of firmness that steadied rather than scolded. "Don't you dare let their ghosts define you." "I'm tired of being strong," I whispered, voice cracking. "I just want to be enough for someone. Just once." "You already are," she said, her voice like a low, familiar hum in the back of my skull. "You've carried yourself through fire, Sarah. You survived where others would have fallen apart. You don't need anyone's love to make you whole." I knew that. I knew deep down I didn't need anybody's love to survive, not after everything I'd endured and overcome. But God's, I wanted it. I ached for it. Was that so bad? Wasn't I worthy of at least that? "You are worthy of the kind of love that moves mountains, Sarah. Do not settle until you get it." A shaky breath left me. "Does that even exist?" Alina was silent, and I could feel her uncertainty like it was mine. "The kind of love that moves mountains? Yeah, right. Either way," she finally said, "I'll always be here, Sarah. Me and that little wolf who calls you Mom." That pulled a reluctant smile out of me. "You mean Daniel?" "Exactly." There was a warmth in her tone now. "Between the two of us, you've already got all the love you need." I didn't answer, but the ache in my chest eased just a little. That night, I lay awake in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of my son's breathing against me. The silence stretched long, pulling me into old memories. Nights spent in a house that never felt like home. Kieran's indifference cutting sharper than words. Celeste's presence shadowing every move I made, even when she wasn't around. The cold indifference in Kieran's eyes when he'd said, "I want a divorce." And then Lucian's. More than anything in the world. He'd loved Zara more than anything in the world. How could I possibly compare to that? Gods, I despised this. No matter how deeply I buried my insecurities, they clawed their way back to the surface at the slightest provocation. I thought I was more than this. I thought I'd built something stronger out of my scars. But maybe, deep, deep down, I was still the same girl, waiting to be chosen by someone who couldn't quite let go of someone else. And that was the cruelest part, that even after everything, I still wanted to be chosen. The next morning dawned gray and cool, matching my mood. If I had my way, I would have spent the whole day curled up in bed feeling sorry for myself. But Daniel had asked me, quietly, carefully, "Mom, can we go see Grandpa Edward?" I had no idea where that request had come from. I hadn't visited my father's grave since the nightmare that was his funeral, and quite frankly, I would rather dive back into the snowfield arena butt naked than sit in front of Edward Lockwood's gravestone. But he was Daniel's grandfather, and we've already established that I would find a way to shrink the moon and hang it on a necklace if my son asked. So I kissed his head gently and whispered, "We'll go after breakfast." Daniel and I stopped by the florist on the way, and he picked out a small bouquet of white lilies. Grandpa's favorite, he told me. I had no idea. By the time we arrived at the cemetery, the morning fog had lifted, leaving the air clear and crisp. The stone paths were slick with dew, the grass freshly trimmed. The cemetery was as beautiful as it was silent, its stillness broken only by rustling leaves and the distant call of birds. Edward Lockwood's grave sat at the top of a hill, an elevated, pristine plot overlooking the valley below. Typical of him, even in death, to want to be exalted above others. I stopped a few paces away, my heart twisting. Maybe I should have been angry, angry at him for being so pitiless to me, angry that his legacy and family image were all that mattered to him, angry that he died before I ever got a chance to prove my worth. Instead, hollow, heavy sadness washed over me. I stared at the photograph inset in the gravestone. A man who'd once seemed larger than life and yet now was reduced to this cold, weather-worn slab. My eyes locked on the engraved name, Edward Lockwood, visionary alpha, beloved husband and father, beloved. The irony was almost as funny as it was cruel. "Hi, Grandpa," Daniel said softly, stepping forward. His little hand set the flowers neatly at the base of the headstone. "Mom and I came to visit you." His voice was steady, and there was a touch of reverence in it that made my chest tighten. "Sorry I haven't come often," he continued. "I spent some time on Dad's private island." He plopped down on the slightly damp earth and crossed his legs. "You'll never believe what's been happening," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Mom won a really huge competition. She was really amazing. You should have seen her." "Daniel," I murmured, but he only smiled up at me. "He should know," he said. "I want him to be proud of you, too." I pressed my lips tightly, looking away as tears pricked my eyes. Pride. Would my father be proud of me if he were alive to witness the LST? Would he have mocked me for daring such an impossible-seeming dream? Or would he have just carried on ignoring me, indifferent to my efforts and achievements? I thought back to the dream I'd had, how he'd declared I was meant for greatness and was going to be some kind of hero. "Remember, little wolf, you were always meant for more." I still didn't know if that had been real or desperate wistfulness. Had he really once believed in me so fiercely, or had I always been an embarrassing disappointment? So many questions, no way of getting answers. We stayed for a while, Daniel chatting freely to the photograph as if his grandfather could hear him. I didn't interrupt. I let him gloat about me to his heart's content, knowing his grandfather couldn't hear him. Part of me wanted to let him believe it, that the dead could listen. Maybe I wanted to believe it too, that maybe somewhere in the ether my father could hear this, that he could be proud. When Daniel finished, he rose to his feet and looked at me expectantly. I crouched beside him, pressing a hand against the cool gravestone. "Goodbye, Father," I murmured. "Wherever you are, I hope." I didn't know what I hoped. All my hopes and dreams concerning my father died when he did. "I hope you're at peace," I finished softly. Just as I rose, a voice broke the quiet. "Sarah." The voice was soft, tremulous, familiar. I turned. Margaret Lockwood stood a few meters away, a thin veil drawn loosely over her hair. She wore black and held a single white lily in her gloved hands. No attendants followed her. I couldn't see a car idling at the gate, just her, small and solitary against the vast expanse of gray stone and green grass. The Lockwood estate wasn't far from here. Had she walked? How often did she come here? Had this become routine? For a second, neither of us spoke. I thought of the last time I'd seen her, holding pie on my porch like a cruel trick of the mind. Every time I saw her, she looked older, deeper lines on her face, heavier shadows under her eyes, more silver threading through her hair. She looked like her very bones bore exhaustion. It was like she was withering away before our eyes. "You're here alone?" I asked finally. She gave a small smile. "I prefer it that way. Your father's company is all I need." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but the faint tremor in it didn't escape me. The sharpness I'd always associated with her seemed blunted, worn down by time and grief. Daniel looked up at her and gave her his signature warm smile. "Hi, Grandma." Margaret's face lit up. "Hello, my love." She spread her arms expectantly, and Daniel looked up at me in question. I nudged him gently. "Go on, hug your grandmother." He shot off towards her, but he was careful not to slam into her as he wrapped his arms around her thin waist. She bent, slowly, like every motion cost her, and gathered him into her arms. The years seemed to fall away from her as she held him, her voice thick with tenderness. "Oh, look at you. You've grown taller, haven't you?" "I think so," Daniel said proudly. "Mom says I might be taller than her soon." My mother laughed softly, brushing his hair back. "You have strong Lockwood genes. Of course you'll be tall, strong too." A strange pang went through me, not quite envy, not quite regret, that foolish longing again. Daniel beamed. "I missed you, Grandma." Her eyes went glassy. "Oh, I missed you too, love." She pulled him back in, tucking him into her side as her gaze lifted to me again. "Congratulations on winning the LST," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you, dear." I wanted to tell her that I didn't need her congratulations, I didn't need her pride, but my traitorous heart lurched, and I gave a stiff nod. "Thanks. Would you come by the estate for a little while? It's been so long since we were under the same roof." Her request was unlike the last time she'd asked. No entitlement, just earnest longing. Like my presence in her home was the one thing she wanted most in the world. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to walk those halls again, to breathe in that air that had reeked of stigma and judgment. But when I looked at my mother, really looked, I saw something fragile there. Not manipulation, not guilt, just loneliness. That huge house, those vast halls. Sure, there were a ton of servants, but where it counted, she was all alone. "All right," I said quietly, "just for a bit." Serafina's Poviv. It had been more than a decade since I'd last driven down the long cobblestone path to the Lockwood estate. The gates loomed just as I remembered them, tall, wrought iron bars curling into elegant, merciless shapes. Once I used to think they looked like vines protecting a sanctuary. Now I saw only the prison they were. The gates creaked open as we approached, their slow groans slicing through the quiet afternoon air. Daniel was practically bouncing in his seat, his face pressed against the window as the familiar expanse unfolded before us. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The manor was as imposing as ever, gray-bricked, symmetrical, magnificent. The slate roof glinted faintly under the late afternoon sun, the pale stone facade catching light in that same proud, cold way. The sight of my childhood home should have filled me with nostalgia. Instead, I just felt hollow. The car rolled to a stop in front of the grand entrance. As I got out of the car and Daniel helped my mother out of the back seat, the front door opened and 2 Omega servants stepped out. At the sight of me, they did a double take. I couldn't blame them. My presence here was probably akin to seeing a ghost. Daniel, my sweet, helpful boy, helped his grandmother up the stairs, his hands firmly on her waist like he could catch her if she stumbled. She smiled at him with a tenderness that wrapped around my heart and squeezed. I stood a few paces behind, feeling like an intruder watching someone else's family reunite. When she turned back to me, her smile faltered, and something uncertain flickered in her eyes. "Come inside, dear. It's been too long." Yeah, well, I wouldn't have minded if it could have been longer. Inside, the manor was both familiar and strange. The bones of it hadn't changed. The wide marble staircase, the chandelier suspended like frozen starlight, the oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors gazing down from gilded frames, the faint scent of lemon polish. But everything seemed muted, dimmed, as if time itself had tried to blot out what once was. My mother moved through the hall with practiced grace, calling softly to the servants, "Tea for 3, please, and the lemon scones Daniel likes. Oh, and the honey biscuits." Daniel blinked. "I've never had your honey biscuits, Grandma." She looked briefly startled, then smiled faintly. "No? Perhaps I just remembered wrong." She looked up at me and smiled gently. "You liked them when you were his age." My teeth clenched. I liked honey biscuits because Celeste loved honey biscuits, so my mother made them so much that they became a staple snack. At least, she was correct about Daniel's preferences. I followed her into the sitting room, where sunlight spilled through tall windows and turned the dust into glitter. Daniel perched on the edge of the velvet sofa next to her, looking around with wide-eyed curiosity. "Grandma, did you change the curtains?" he asked. The fact that he'd been here often enough to notice minute changes like that sent a twinge of envy. My mother smiled. "Sharp eye, hon. The old ones were fading." Her tone was casual, but her hands shook slightly as she poured the tea. She offered me a cup with a tentative look, as though testing whether I'd take it. I did, mostly out of politeness. We sat like that for a few minutes, her fussing over Daniel, me trying not to shrink into the furniture. She asked him 1,000,001 questions, mainly about his time on the island and what he'd been doing since he came back. He answered excitedly, the love and adoration he had for his grandma evident. It was one of the reasons I could never fully hate my parents. They'd ostracized me for my mistake, but they'd never made Daniel, the product of that night, feel anything other than adored. My gaze fixed on the old grandfather clock beside the mantel, and I counted the seconds under my breath. How long did we have to stay before we could politely leave? 172, 174, 175. Grandma, do you still bake cookies? Daniel asked excitedly. Of course, she said, smoothing her skirt. Would you like to make some together? He grinned, bright and open. Can we? Her eyes softened in that way I'd never seen directed at me. I'd love that, sweetheart. Yes. When they stood to go to the kitchen, my mother turned to me. Sarah, will you join us? I shook my head stiffly. I'll just get some air. It's a lot being back. Her expression shuddered ever so slightly. I understand. No, she didn't, but I nodded anyway. The moment they disappeared down the hall, I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I wandered to the window. The garden stretched endlessly beyond it, tamed, manicured, beautiful in a way that had always felt fake. The Lockwoods had always preferred their beauty controlled. The hedges were trimmed in perfect symmetry, the flower beds so precise they might as well have been drawn with a ruler. And then I saw it, the old oak. It still stood at the far end of the garden, tall and defiant, its gnarled branches thick with leaves. Beneath it, the swing. The same wooden seat, the same sturdy ropes, the same one from my dream. Before I knew it, I was outside. The air was warm, scented faintly of flowers and soil. I walked down the familiar path, my shoes crunching over the gravel. Every corner of this garden felt suspended in amber, preserved, unchanged, yet tinged with distance. The flowers no longer spilled wildly over borders, but the roses and lavender still provided a riot of color that softened the formal edges. And there, under the great oak, was the swing. My breath caught. It swayed lightly in the breeze, creaking faintly, the wood worn smooth with age. My hand trembled as I brushed the seat. Solid. Real. My throat tightened. I could almost hear a child's laughter, see a man's broad shadow cast across the grass. I sat down, the wood warm against my palms. From here, the view was almost identical to my dream, the rose bushes lining the stone path, the fountain glinting in the sun. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt dizzy. The dream and my longing tangled so tightly I couldn't tell which was which. Had I truly sat here once, giggling while my father stood behind me, steadying the ropes with those hands that built empires? Or had that just been the wishful invention of a lonely child who'd wanted to believe she'd been loved? Higher, Papa. If I push you too high, little wolf, you'll take off flying and forget to come back down. I won't forget. I'll always come back to you. That's because you're my Seraphina, my precious princess. My cheeks were wet before I even realized I was crying. Miss Seraphina? The voice startled me. I opened my eyes to see an elderly Omega in a crisp black suit standing a few feet away. His gray hair was neatly parted, and his eyes, clear, sharp, kind, widened when he saw me. Miss Seraphina, he repeated softly, his lips parting in disbelief. It is you. My heart stuttered. Paxton. I hastily wiped at my wet cheeks. Hi. Our old butler smiled widely, his eyes nearly disappearing beneath his wrinkled lids. Oh, it's been far too long since you've been home, Miss Sarah. Home, I echoed softly, testing the word. It didn't fit. Paxton's gaze drifted to the swing and softened. Your father built that himself, you know, said it was for his little wolf. Even after you left, he'd come here often. Stand there, just looking at it. I blinked, caught off guard. My father? He nodded. He never said a word to anyone, but I knew. He missed you. We all did. My chest constricted. You must be mistaken, I said lightly, forcing a smile. You probably mean Celeste. Celeste was the one people missed. How could you miss what you never noticed? His brows furrowed. No, Miss Sarah. I know who I mean. Your sister hated these swings, remember? I blinked, unsure what to say. I wanted to dismiss the old butler, to scoff and walk away, but his eyes held a conviction that made my chest ache. He visited your room often, too, he continued softly. Always alone. I'd find the lamp lit in there at night, even when he was supposed to be asleep. My voice cracked. My room, he smiled faintly. It's just as you left it, if you'd like to see. My stomach twisted. That's not possible. He shook his head. Your father never allowed anyone to change it. That's not possible, I repeated. Did Paxton have dementia? Shouldn't he have retired anyway? He chuckled a little, patronizingly. Would you like to see? I hesitated, and then hopped off the swing. Fine, I mumbled, if only to prove you wrong. I heard Daniel and my mother chattering away animatedly as Paxton led me up the grand stairs to the second floor. The corridors felt smaller than I remembered. Childhood had a way of enlarging everything. Ceilings, doorways, the distance between rooms. Now everything seemed narrower, heavier with silence. The one leading to my old room was lined with portraits. My mother's serene face, my father's stern, imposing gaze, Celeste's perfect smile, Ethan's smug grin, and tucked near the end, mine. I paused in front of it. My younger self looked back at me, barely 13, uncertain but hopeful. She still had the light in her eyes that the coming years would eventually dim. I wanted to reach into the frame and warn her. Tell her how cruel the world would be to her. Tell her that her heart would break in more ways than she could count. Paxton stopped at my room door and opened it quietly. "Here we are." When he opened the door, a faint scent of lavender and old paper wafted out. I stepped inside and froze. It was exactly as it had been the day I left. The bed neatly made, the pale curtains fluttering in the breeze, the bookshelf lined with old fairy tales, adventure, and romance novels. Even the framed drawing I'd made at 7, a crude wolf under a crescent moon, still hung crookedly on the wall. Paxton's voice was soft behind me. "Before your father passed, this was one of the places he visited most often, the garden swing and this room. He'd sit right there by the bed for hours sometimes." I turned. "You're sure?" He nodded, eyes kind. "He missed you, Miss Serafina. More than you know." The words struck deep, splitting something open inside me. I wanted to reject them, to insist he was wrong, but my lips refused to shape the denial. "Thank you," I whispered finally. He inclined his head and quietly excused herself, leaving me alone with the ghosts of my childhood. I walked slowly across the room, my fingers brushing the familiar textures. The bedspread, the carved edges of the dresser, the faint scratches on the desk where I'd once tried to carve my initials with a hairpin. The doodles of my Lucky Charm over the mirrors and desks and walls. A single tear slipped down before I could stop it, then another, and then a flood. My father had kept my room intact? He'd sat here every day missing me? Why? The answer was too improbable to consider, yet it was the only one that made sense. Could it be possible that the dream had been a memory? That my father, in his own deeply flawed way, had loved me? But then, why would he treat me so terribly? Why did he disown me, abandon me? "Sarah," I turned sharply. My mother stood in the doorway, one hand pressed against the frame, her eyes wide and glistening. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "I didn't mean to intrude," she whispered. "I just came to tell you the cookies are ready." Her gaze dropped to the tears on my cheeks. I saw her flinch, as though each one cut her open. Then, hesitantly, she stepped forward. "Oh, my love," she murmured. "I should have brought you home sooner." Before I could react, she wrapped her arms around me. I went rigid. It had been years, decades maybe, since my mother had held me. Her scent was faintly citrusy, the same perfume she'd worn when I was a child. Her body trembled against mine. For a heartbeat, I considered pulling away, but I didn't. I stood still and let her hold me, unsure if I was forgiving her or simply too tired to resist the warmth. When she finally pulled back, her eyes shone wet and weary. "Welcome home, Serafina." The words landed softly, painfully. Home. It still didn't quite fit. How could I be welcome to a place I'd never really belonged in? Before I could answer, a sharp sound echoed from downstairs, a clatter followed by Daniel's startled exclamation. My blood ran cold. I was already moving before my mother could react, the thud of my rushed footsteps echoing through the hall as I bolted down the staircase. The smell of burnt sugar and butter hit me first, then the sight. Cookies scattered across the marble floor, an upturned tray, Daniel standing rigid and wide-eyed. And Celeste. She towered over him, fury etched into every elegant line of her face. I didn't breathe as my vision tunneled, narrowing on the scene before me. My son, my sister, and the storm gathering between them, Celeste's povey. The Lockwood Manor had never felt so suffocating. Every chandelier shimmered with sterile perfection. Every corner smelled faintly of lemon polish and wood, but underneath it all was the stench of humiliation. 3 days had passed since the end of the LST. 3 days since Kieran had looked at me as if I were something pitiful, an inconvenience, and then walked away. I'd told myself he just needed time, that after all the noise settled, he'd come crawling back like always, apologizing, rationalizing, making it up to me. That's how it always went. Kieran might be stubborn and proud, but he was predictable, and he loved me. So when his name flashed on my phone this morning, shock and hope crashed through me, my heart leaping. Kieran, I said his name the way one breathes after drowning, half relief, half disbelief. Celeste. His voice was calm. Too calm. Can we meet? There's something I need to say in person. I knew it. I knew he couldn't stay away for long. Of course, I said softly, as if I hadn't already bolted to the vanity, as if my heart wasn't hammering loud enough to be heard through the line. When I hung up, relief and giddy anticipation bubbled up. I nearly laughed out loud in incredulity and ecstasy. Yes, yes, yes! My mother appeared at my door at that moment, coat in hand, ready to leave for the cemetery. Is something going on? She asked curiously. I beamed at her. Kieran wants to see me. Oh. Her expression shuddered, and I frowned. Aren't you happy? I am. It's just... She shook her head. You promised to visit your father's grave with me today. You haven't been since the funeral. I waved her off, already heading to my closet. I rifled through dresses, silk, chiffon, lace. Tell father I'll come tomorrow, I murmured absently to my mother. Celeste, I whipped my head back. What? It's not like he's going anywhere. Her eyes widened. Celeste! I rolled my eyes, turning back to my closet. My mind spun with possibilities. The ring, Kieran kneeling before me, the headline. Celeste Lockwood and Alpha Kieran Blackthorne, the union of legends. I'll visit soon, I said. I'll even bring Kieran so he can be properly introduced as his son-in-law. I smirked over my shoulder. The right way this time. My mother didn't say anything as she quietly left my room and shut the door. My hand shook as I swept blush across my cheeks. I tried to steady myself, layering on composure like war paint, focusing on each precise motion to contain my nerves. I slipped into a sheer red dress, sleek, bold, and almost scandalously tailored to every curve. The fabric caught the light in a way that made it seem poured over my skin, accentuating the warmth of my tan and the long, shapely lines of my legs. When I stood before the mirror, I saw the version of me Kieran could never resist, the woman he always came back to, even after 10 years, the one who could undo him with something as simple as a smile. And as I left my room, I made a promise to myself. This time, I wouldn't let him out of my grasp. The restaurant was empty when I arrived, not a soul in sight, except for the waiter who opened the door for me. Candlelight flickered over the velvet seats and gilded walls, and a soft piano played somewhere unseen. He'd booked the entire place. My lips curled, my chest swelled. This was it. This was fucking it. Kieran was already there, seated by the window. His posture was straight, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting second, I saw the same man who had once sworn he'd protect me against the world. The man who'd been mine before Sarah sank her claws into him. Never again. I didn't realize you could be so dramatic, Key. I teased lightly, setting my clutch down as I slid into the seat opposite him. He'd already ordered wine, and I wrapped my fingers around the cool stem of my glass. Booking an entire restaurant? You could have just proposed like a normal man. I winked. You know I don't mind the audience. He didn't smile. Celeste, he said, his voice low, careful. There's something I need to say. Straight to the point. Oh, what a man. I smoothed my hair, ignoring the faint prickle in my stomach. Don't be nervous. I promise I'll say yes. Celeste. The sound of my name again, firmer, colder, cut through my fantasy like a blade. My fingers froze around my wine glass. What is it? He took a breath, steady and deep. His gaze didn't waver as his eyes locked on mine. We need to end this. For a heartbeat, I didn't understand the words. They made no sense strung together like that. End. What? This, he said, gesturing between us. Our relationship. I laughed. I actually laughed. Oh, gods, you're terrible at this. You nearly had me for a second. Celeste. No. I shook my head. You know I like theatrics, but this is a bit much, Key. You don't get to fake a breakup right before you propose. His expression didn't shift. I'm not joking. Silence cracked between us. The candles flickered and the piano faltered into another key. My throat went dry. You're serious? I am. I stared at him, trying to decipher the lines of his face. Did Sarah put you up to this? I asked finally. Or was it Daniel? He's always hated me, and I knew that pretentious invitation was a tactic. This isn't about them, he cut in sharply. Then what? My voice rose before I could stop it. What the actual fuck is happening right now? Kieran sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Celeste, I've failed you. I thought I could love you the way you wanted, but I can't. I don't think I ever have, and I won't keep pretending. It's wrong, for both of us. My mind recoiled. This couldn't be real. Panic rose, refusing to let reality take hold. This wasn't fucking happening. You're wrong. The words came out brittle, trembling. I know you, Kieran. You don't mean that. I do. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, my chest, my fingertips. He couldn't mean it, not after everything. I've given you 10 years of my life, I spat. 10 years of waiting, loving, fighting. You think you can just end it? I swung my arm around the empty restaurant. Like this? His eyes softened, but only with pity. That made it worse. You deserve better than me, he said quietly. Someone who won't hurt you the way I have. For God's sake, stop acting like you're doing this for me. My voice cracked. This isn't noble, Kieran. It's cruel. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, silent, steady, resolute, the same way he'd looked at me when he'd walked away after the trials. Was this how he had divorced Sarah? Cold and unfeeling? Call me whatever you want, he said calmly, like he was discussing lunch plans instead of ending our fucking relationship. I'll take responsibility for everything. I'll handle the press, any rumors that may arise, everything. I'll even make sure you're compensated for the time and effort you've put into. Compensated? I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to draw blood. Like this is a business deal that fell through? I know you have your heart set on it, but there won't be an engagement ceremony, he continued, tone clipped. Our relationship has to end here. The finality in his tone made something inside me shatter. That festering hate that had been growing exploded like a ripe pimple. My palm struck his cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the empty restaurant. How dare you? My breaths came ragged. You think I care about your money, your stupid offers of compensation? I don't want any of that, Kieran. I want you. Tears spilled down, hot and traitorous, streaking my perfectly painted face. You think some press statement can fix this? That some fucking check that I don't need can erase the fact that I loved you more than my own blood? His face had snapped to the side at my strike, and he sat frozen, his eyes locked on something in the distance. Look at me, I shouted. You were mine before Sarah ever came into the picture, and yet I bore the shame of being the woman who stole her sister's husband when it was the other way around. You owe me, Kieran. You owe me. His eyes flickered. Pain, guilt, but still determination. I can't marry you, Celeste. Not when I don't love you the way you deserve. I refuse to make the same mistake a second time. You deserve to be with someone who truly, truly loves you. My nails bit into my palms as his words struck my heart, and I fought the scream building up in my throat. The tattoo on my arm burned like a fresh scar. I'd done that already, been with someone who loved me. And I'd deserted that person for Kieran. I'd suppressed my wolf for Kieran. I would not let all my sacrifices be in vain. No fucking way. So I swallowed the scream, straightened my shoulders, and wiped my tears away with the back of my hand. I don't accept this. None of it. He frowned. You can hate me, he said, standing slowly. I'll take the blame. I'll handle the fallout, but this ends here. There will be no engagement, no marriage. You will not be my Luna, Celeste. I'm sorry. Fuck that. I rose too, every inch of me trembling. You'll regret this. He shook his head. No, I don't think I will. I'll send out the invitations for our engagement party, I replied coolly. You'll receive one soon, and you'll show up. And when you see me standing there, looking stunning, wearing the dress meant for your wife, your Luna, you'll come to your senses. Celeste. I didn't let him finish. My heels clicked sharply across the marble as I turned and walked out, head high, throat tight. The air outside was cold, biting, too bright against the dizziness spinning in my skull. I slid into my car and gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached. I laughed through tears, disbelief swirling in my chest. Break up, I whispered. The words stuck, raw, surreal. My foot hit the accelerator before reason could catch up. The city blurred around me, ribbons of traffic, sun glare, and the white blur of my reflection in the windshield. I didn't remember the decision to drive to the mall, but the feel of Kieran's black card in my hand filled me with relish. I would have much preferred to claw his face off, but this would have to do for now. By the time I was done, Kieran's account had taken a beating. Designer coats, diamond earrings, a new clutch I didn't need, and several pairs of heels I'd probably never wear. The clerks, of course, were delighted. They fluttered around me like ants to sugar, their voices syrupy with compliments. "Oh, Miss Lockwood, that shade is divine on you. Would you like us to box up the entire collection?" I let them. I let their flattery wash over me like a balm, numbing the hollow ache Kieran's words had carved out of me. Every swipe of his black card was another attempt to erase the sting, to buy back the illusion of control. Silk, cashmere, gold, things that used to make me feel powerful, untouchable. But today it barely scratched the surface. No matter how many glossy bags filled the back seat of my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trying to fill an emptiness that had Kieran's name carved into it. When I pulled up to the manor again, I couldn't believe it was just late afternoon. It felt like I'd lived in 3 consecutive days. I stepped inside, exhausted, heels clicking against marble, and called out, "Mother, I'm home." No answer. I sighed, setting my bags on the sideboard in the foyer. "You will not believe what happened, Mom. Honestly, I could use one of your soups right now." Then I froze. At the far end of the hall, near the foot of the stairs, a small figure stood waiting with a tray in his hands, the scent of sugar and butter weaving through the air. Daniel. Anger consumed me in a blistering wave as I slammed the door shut. Daniel's povee. The cookies smelled like sunshine and vanilla and everything good in the world. Grandma said it was because I didn't stir too much. "Gentle hands make soft cookies," she'd said, tapping my nose lightly with a gentle smile. I liked it when she smiled like that. It made her eyes crinkle. It made her look less sad. I wished Mom could have joined us to bake, but she'd gone outside for a while saying she wanted some air. I knew what that meant. Air meant thinking, and that meant something heavy sitting on her chest. Hopefully she'd feel better if she came back to the smell of cookies. I arranged them on the tray carefully. Chocolate chip, some a little burnt at the edges, but Grandma said that made them taste like caramel. I specially set aside the one with extra chips for Mom. "Be careful, darling," Grandma said as I balanced the tray in my hands, which were covered by oven mitts. "They're still hot." "I got it," I said proudly. "I'll take them out to Mom. Maybe they'll make her smile." Grandma's face softened in that way that Mom's did when she was happy-sad. "Actually, love, I think I saw your mother go upstairs earlier. I'll go fetch her, okay?" "Oh." I nodded. I could tell Grandma wanted alone time with Mom, probably to say grown-up things they didn't want me to hear. "Okay." The tray was warm, and the cookies made my stomach growl a little. But I waited patiently at the foot of the stairs for them to come back down. I wanted Mom to have the first taste. Then the front door slammed. The sound was sharp and angry, echoing down the hall so loud that I jumped. One of the cookies rolled right off the tray and hit the carpet. I turned slowly. Aunt Celeste stood there in the doorway, her sunglasses on, even though she was indoors now. Her red dress shimmered like fire. Pretty, but not the warm kind. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hair was perfect. Everything about her was perfect. Except her smile. She didn't have one. "Hi, Aunt Celeste," I said, trying to sound polite like Mom taught me. It was especially hard with Aunt Celeste. "Do you want a cookie?" "Grandma and I just made them. They're chocolate chip." She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, then at the cookies, and then back at me. Then she pushed her sunglasses into her hair, and I had to hold in a gasp. I'd never seen such... What was that? Anger? Hate? No one had ever looked at me like that, except Aunt Celeste back in OTS when I invited her to Mom's party. And she looked at me like that now, except it was so much worse this time. When she finally spoke, her voice was smooth, but not gentle. "Cookies," she repeated, like the word tasted bad. "You're offering me cookies?" "Yeah." I lifted the tray a bit higher, though my hands shook a little. I wanted Mom and Grandma to hurry back downstairs. Mom says sweets can make you feel better when you're sad. Aunt Celeste's lips twitched into a smile that wasn't quite. "Oh, is that what your mom said?" I nodded, smiling even though I didn't like the way she said Mom. "You can have one if you want. They're really good. I put extra chocolate in." But before I could finish, her hand shot out, fast and sharp, and the tray went flying. The cookies hit the floor, shattering into pieces. Chocolate smudged the rug. The tray clattered so loud my ears rang. I just stood there frozen, my hands empty, and I felt the way I felt when I invited her to Mom's party and she cursed at me. Stupid. Aunt Celeste didn't even look at the mess. She was breathing hard, her shoulders trembling like she was cold, though the house wasn't. Her perfume filled the air, jasmine and something bitter underneath. I started, but my throat felt tight, and my eyes stung. Then I heard footsteps from upstairs. Mom appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Grandma followed behind her, eyes wide. The moment Mom saw the mess, her worried expression changed. Her eyes locked on Aunt Celeste, and I swear the air got colder. This time, I was the one shivering. "Did you just—" Mom's voice was low, dangerous. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Celeste turned slowly, raising an eyebrow like nothing had happened. "It was an accident," she said, like she was bored. "An accident?" Mom stepped closer and stood in front of me, blocking my view of Aunt Celeste. "You call knocking a tray out of a child's hands an accident?" I peered around Mom to see Aunt Celeste crossing her arms, her lips curling into that knot smile. Oops. I heard Mom's teeth grind together. She was shaking, but I think it was from anger, not fear. I rarely saw her like this. I hated seeing her like this. "If you ever touch my son again," she said quietly and coldly, "I will tear your throat out." There was a heartbeat of silence where I didn't breathe. Then Aunt Celeste laughed. It was a sharp, high sound that made me want to cover my ears. "Really, Sarah? And how exactly do you plan to do that? With your weak little human nails?" She scoffed. "You couldn't even scratch a lottery ticket, let alone claw anyone's throat out." That hit something deep. I could feel it. Mom flinched, just barely, but then she straightened. I wanted to jump to Mom's defense to tell Aunt Celeste that she had an amazing wolf, but I'd promised to keep the secret. I told Mom she could trust me. I pressed my lips together tightly. "I don't need claws to protect what's mine," Mom declared. "Please," Aunt Celeste sneered, "because you lucked your way to first position, you think your worthless ass can—" "That's enough." Grandma stepped into view, and I flinched. I'd never heard her sound like that before. It wasn't a yell. It was worse. It was the sound of authority, of something powerful and wild. I recognized it immediately. Her wolf. "Mom," Celeste started, but shut up when Grandma's eyes flashed gold. "You will not speak to your sister like that in this house," Grandma growled, looking and sounding nothing like the frail woman I had baked cookies with. For the first time, Aunt Celeste looked unsure. Her chin lifted, but her voice shook a little when she spoke. "So that's how it is now? Even my mother's wolf takes her side?" Grandma's gaze softened slightly, but her voice stayed firm. "It's not about sides, Celeste. It's about right and wrong." Aunt Celeste shook her head, tears starting to build but not fall. "No, it's always been about Sarah, hasn't it? You're all so quick to jump to her side. She ruins my life and yet plays the victim. And now, because she won the stupid trials, you're welcoming her back with open arms?" Mom didn't say anything. Her hand was on my shoulder now, reassuring and warm. Aunt Celeste took a step forward, her voice rising. "And what about me, huh? The one who was hurt? The daughter who had everything stolen from her? Where's my love?" "Celeste," Grandma said softly, "you've always been loved." "Don't," Aunt Celeste snapped, cutting her off. "Don't lie to me. You love honor, Mother. You love reputation. You love whichever child is making you proud." She shook her head. "You don't love me. You just love what I was supposed to be." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a second she looked so small and lost. I almost wanted to hug her. I might have, if I wasn't scared she would scratch my face off. Grandma's hand trembled. I could tell she wanted to reach out, but she didn't. Maybe she didn't know how to. Then Aunt Celeste's gaze fell on me again. "Yep," that was definitely hate and anger. "And you," she said bitterly, "perfect little Daniel, you're a little peacemaker, aren't you? Always trying to fix things, always trying to make everyone happy. Do you think that works? That cookies and smiles fix shit?" "Celeste," Mom warned, but I shook my head. "You're just sad," I said softly. "It's okay. People say mean things when they're sad." Something flickered across her face, something like guilt. But then she straightened, scoffing. "Sad? Oh, don't be ridiculous. I'm perfectly fine. I'm not the slut who married my sister's boyfriend so I wouldn't have to raise a bastard." I flinched. Mom froze. Grandma gasped. Aunt Celeste's not smile was even wider. "What? Did I hit a nerve?" "That's enough," Grandma said again, louder this time. Her hand lifted like she might slap Aunt Celeste, but I darted forward and grabbed her wrist. "Grandma," I said quietly, "don't. Please." Everyone went still, even Aunt Celeste. I looked up at her and tried to smile, even though my chest hurt. It's okay. I know you didn't mean it. You're just in a bad mood. Her face twisted like I'd said something awful. I'm not in a bad mood, she snapped. I don't need your pity, Daniel. I don't? Her voice broke this time, the words tumbling out like shattered pieces. I have everything I've ever wanted. Kieran and I are getting married soon. In fact, our engagement party is just around the... She cocked her head, and I squirmed under her gaze. Oh, I get it now. You're trying so hard to curry favor because you know I'm going to be your stepmother soon. Mom moved again, blocking my view. Her voice was low, shaking, deadly calm. My son doesn't have to curry favor with anyone, least of all someone who doesn't even understand what love is anymore. Aunt Celeste recoiled like she'd been hit. You think you're so noble, Sarah, but you've just learned how to hide your claws behind your pathetic little facade. Mom shook her head, and I heard the pity in her voice. And you wonder why everyone is leaving your side. She turned then, taking my hand. Let's go, Daniel. Wait, Grandma began, panicked, but Mom just shook her head again. It was a mistake to come here in the first place. Grandma's face twisted in pain. Please, Sarah. But Mom was already tugging me toward the door. I glanced back once. Aunt Celeste stood in the middle of the mess, cookies crushed beneath her heels, her lipstick smudged, her hands trembling. For a second, I thought she'd cry. But she didn't. She just stood there, frozen, while Grandma knelt to pick up the tray in silence. Outside, the air was cool and sharp, like rain might come soon. I didn't say anything, neither did Mom. We just walked to the car. When she started the engine, I glanced at her. Her face was calm, but her eyes were wet. Mom? I whispered. Yes, baby? Why is Aunt Celeste so mean? I didn't understand it. Mom was amazing. Uncle Ethan was nice. Why was their sister like that? Mom didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, her jaw tight. Sometimes, she said softly, when people are hurt, they try to make everyone else around them hurt too. Like you said, people are mean when they're sad. I nodded slowly, even though I didn't really understand all of it. I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers squeezed mine gently as she turned back to me. Honey, you know Celeste's reaction to you is a testament to her character and has nothing to do with you, right? I nodded and gave her a smile I hoped would draw out one of hers. She only exhaled and leaned forward, kissing my hair. My beautiful, perfect boy. She pulled back to look at me. Her eyes were so pretty. Never stop being kind to people, no matter how mean they are to you. Okay? I nodded. I promise. The drive home was quiet. The sun was setting, turning the world gold and pink, and everything felt better. Until Mom stepped on the brakes and muttered angrily, You have got to be kidding me. I followed her gaze and sighed. There in our driveway, leaning against the hood of his car with his arms crossed, was my dad. Serafina's Pove. The sight of Kieran hit me like a punch to the gut, twisting my insides with a nauseating churn. He stood by his car, arms crossed, the chilled wind teasing his dark hair into disarray. That familiar brooding expression was painted across his face. For a second, I couldn't move. I just gripped the steering wheel tighter, like it was the last shred of my sanity. Of course he was here. My first thought was bitter and instinctive. He came to defend her again. Maybe Celeste had already run crying to him, spinning some tragic story about me attacking her in front of her stepson. And he'd come to tell me off, right here, in front of Daniel, because heaven forbid Saint Celeste ever be at fault. Mom? Daniel's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Why's Dad here? My throat was dry. I'm not sure, I answered, though I was very sure. It was always the same pattern. Celeste cried wolf. Kieran came running. I parked haphazardly next to the Escalade. The gear shift clicked loudly in the quiet. Stay here, I ordered Daniel, unbuckling my seatbelt. His hand froze on his own seatbelt. But... I mean it, Daniel. I tried to make my voice gentle, but it still came out strained. I opened the car door. Do not get out until your father leaves. He hesitated, frowning. I felt a slight twinge of guilt. I was hardly ever strict with Daniel, but I was already high-strung from the fiasco at the Lockwood Manor. Plus, he'd seen too much tonight already. His small face still carried the traces of confusion and worry from the Lockwood Manor. I didn't want my son to hear me and his father exchange verbal blows. I reached out and brushed his hair back, trying to smile. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just going to talk. He nodded slowly, though the uncertainty in his eyes told me he didn't believe it was okay. When I opened the door and stepped out, the evening air bit at my skin. The street was quiet, except for the rustle of dry leaves and the low hum of my car engine. Kieran straightened as I approached, eyes immediately scanning me as though checking for injuries. That look sent a bolt of something sharp through my chest, part ache, part anger, all tangled. I crossed my arms, defensiveness prickling along my skin. What did she tell you this time? That I attacked her unprovoked? That I assaulted her with my son's cookies? Sarah. Or maybe she went a different angle, I pressed, my voice sharpening. Tell me, did she paint the altercation to make me seem like an unfit mother? He looked pained, and he opened his mouth to interrupt, but I didn't let him. I'm done being your convenient villain, Kieran, I said coldly. And I can't believe you would come here to scold me in front of our son after the way she treated him right in front of you. Something in his expression shifted. Guilt? Frustration? Maybe both. I didn't come to scold you, Sarah, he said finally, his tone quiet. I came to talk. I blinked, surprised by his subdued demeanor, but I refused to let my guard down. I have nothing to talk to you about. You always say that, he murmured, stepping closer. But we both know that's not true. I laughed once, brittle and humorless. Do we? Kieran sighed. Look, Sarah, about me and Celeste. I hear you're getting married soon, I spat out. Congratulations. He froze. What? Look, I said, gesturing vaguely, suddenly exhausted. I genuinely don't give a fuck about what goes on with you and Celeste. You can marry her, parade her around as your Luna, and have the picture-perfect life you've been dreaming of. I just want one thing, keep her away from me and my son. After that, silence stretched taut. The lamplight cut across his features, throwing shadows that made him look haunted. Then he said the last thing I expected. There's not going to be a wedding. I must have misheard him. What? I broke up with Celeste, he said. His voice was quiet, but the words were clear. My first instinct was disbelief. Is that? Then anger surged. What kind of stupid joke is this, Kieran? He shook his head firmly. It's not, I scoffed. Celeste just gloated all up and down my mother's house about your engagement party, and now you're here spewing this bullshit? His jaw clenched. I don't know why she would say that after we're broken up. I let out a sharp bark of laughter. Goddess, you two are fucking exhausting. I'm not in the mood for this latest performance. It's not a performance, he cut in sharply. It's over between me and Celeste. I mean it, Sarah. The raw sincerity in his tone unnerved me. Could he possibly be telling the truth? I squeezed my arms tighter around myself, desperate to contain the suddenly frantic pounding of my heart. Okay, let's pretend for a moment that I believe you. I arched a brow. What the hell do you want from me? Congratulations? Condolences? He took a slow breath, as though choosing his words carefully. No, I just thought you should know. You thought I should know, I echoed. Why the fuck? Behind me, the car door creaked open. Mom? Daniel's small voice cut through. I turned, my irritation melting instantly into softness. I told you to stay inside the car, baby. His eyes darted between me and Kieran, and he moved closer instead. It's fine, Kieran said gently, crouching slightly to meet his eyes. I just need to talk to your mom for a bit, bud. Daniel looked between us searchingly. Then, with more maturity than any 9-year-old should have, he nodded. Okay, he waved the house keys in his hands. I'll go inside. Mom, can I make some cereal? I nodded, my lower lip trembling. Gods, he was so precious. Sure, but don't eat too much. I'll be right in to make dinner, sweetie. As soon as Daniel disappeared inside, the tension returned. Thicker, heavier. Kieran exhaled. He's a good kid, he said quietly. You raised him well. I would share the credit, but you couldn't stand to be in the same room as me, so I was never privy to your parenting technique. He inhaled sharply like I'd stabbed him in the heart, but he nodded slowly. I deserve that, I scoffed. Sarah, he said after a long stretch of silence, the real reason I broke up with Celeste, the real reason I came to tell you is because... He stiffened, like he was bracing himself. I did it because I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I frowned. Lie about what? He hesitated. His throat moved as he swallowed, and when he met my eyes, I saw something raw there. Something almost helpless. About us, he said simply. About what I feel for you. I went cold all over. Kieran. No, let me finish, he said, his voice hoarse now. I know I was an abhorrent bastard. I know I destroyed everything that could have been good between us. Fuck, I never even gave it a chance to be good. But every day since the divorce, He stopped, inhaled shakily. I thought I'd feel relieved, free. But I wasn't. From the moment you walked out of our home, out of my life, I was hollow. He looked at me like the word itself cost him something. I regret it, he continued tightly. All of it. The way I treated you. The way I let Celeste and my family poison my perception of you. The years I wasted pretending I didn't care. I stared at him, my mind a tangle of disbelief, and more disbelief. You regret it? I repeated softly, almost to myself. After all this time? He nodded. Sarah, you have no idea how sorry I... My sharp bark of laughter cut him off. Is this how men work? You break something beyond repair, then decide you miss how it used to shine? Sarah, listen to yourself. I gasped incredulously. You sound like a disgruntled child, Kieran. You wanted Celeste when you had me, and now that you have her, you want me? Do you want me to say I forgive you? I asked, stepping closer now, anger making my words tremble. I couldn't believe he was doing this. After all the pain and heartache he caused me, I couldn't believe he was fucking doing this. Do you want redemption? A clean slate? A pat on the back for finally realizing what you had? If I had any sympathy to give, if I hadn't spent every day since our divorce armoring my heart, the hurt splashed across his face might have pierced me. But I'm not that woman anymore, I said. The one who used to wait and hope and make excuses for you. She died a little with every cold night and every humiliation I endured while you pined after my sister. Sarah, I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I cut in sharply. Because you won't get it. Kieran nodded vigorously, his hair flopping slightly with his movement. I know. I've done too much to be let off the hook so easily. I just needed you to know that I'm done running from the truth, that I'm going to make things right even if it takes the rest of my life. I shook my head. Breaking up with Celeste doesn't make things right. I know. It doesn't erase what you did. I know. And it doesn't change what we are, or rather what we're not. I know that too. Then why are you here? I demanded. If not to be forgiven, then what the ever-loving fuck do you want from me? Kieran's eyes softened, and that made it worse. You, he said simply. Not your forgiveness, not your understanding, just you. I froze. His words punched straight through my ribcage, closing icy fingers around my heart. When I turned away, it was partly to hide the sudden moisture in my eyes. Don't, I whispered. Don't say things you don't mean. I do. I almost laughed again, but it came out as a broken sound this time. And what? You think we can just undo the last 10 years? You think you can walk back into my life and I'll fall into your arms because you finally decided to see me? To choose me? No, Kieran said quietly, but I can start by not losing you again. The last shred of my composure snapped. Don't you dare, I hissed, turning back to him. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. He flinched as I continued. You don't get to rewrite history because your conscience is acting up. He didn't back down. This isn't about conscience. Then what is it about? He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to flicker behind his eyes before he said it. It's about the bond, he whispered. You feel it too, don't you? Seraphina's puff. For a moment everything went still. The night, my pulse, my breath. There was a ringing in my ears, high and shrill. It drowned out all else except two words, repeating themselves over and over again in the span of a breath. The bond. The bond. The bond. The bond. Fuck this. I turned on my heels, but I only took one step before Kieran reached for me, his hand catching my wrist, not rough but firm enough to stop me. The contact sent a violent spark of electricity up my arm, supercharging every cell in my body, just like at the park, and the island, and the yacht, and the car wreck, and fuck! You feel it, he declared, every word soaked in desperation. Sarah, tell me you feel it. The anger came roaring back, fierce, burning, stronger than any stupid fucking feeling. Is that what this is? I whispered, rage shaking my entire being. Your regret is your wolf tugging at you? You think I might be your mate, so suddenly I'm worth the trouble? He shook his head, stepping closer, but I backed away even as his hand stayed wrapped around my wrist. Gods, the sensation was dizzying. And what happens when you find out I'm not? I demanded. When some other woman's touch stirs your precious bond, Do I get discarded again? My vision blurred slightly, and I hated the quiver in my voice when I added, "That's your memo, isn't it?" "Sarah, save it." I turned from him, fury thrumming in every nerve. If that's your reason for regret, it's weak and pathetic. Whatever epiphany you're having, I want no part of it, and I don't want your atonement. I don't want you. There was that stupid pain flashing across his face again. "I know you may not believe me," he said through clenched teeth, "but, Sarah, whatever this is, it's real, and I'm not walking away from it." For a moment, the sincerity in his gaze almost broke through my defenses. I nearly gave in, but then memory crashed over me, vivid, biting. I remembered everything with sickening clarity. The humiliation of that morning after the blood moon hunt, the icy silence of our marriage, the ruthless finality of our divorce. The pain swept aside the flicker of weakness, solidifying my resolve. I yanked my hand free. An instant chill washed over me. "You already walked away, Kieran," I said, my voice as cold as I felt. "You just didn't expect me to walk too." His jaw tightened. "Sarah, do you know what I wish for you, Kieran?" His brows drew together as he waited. I stepped closer, close enough that I could hear the thunderous roar of his heart. Or maybe that was mine. "I wish for you to get back together with Celeste." He froze, a deer in headlights. "I wish for you two to get married, have many, many pups." I stepped closer still, craned my neck so he could see the pure loathing in my eyes. At least I hoped that was the emotion I felt burning through me with icy intensity. "I wish for you to spend the rest of your life trapped in a loveless marriage. I wish for your nights to be cold, empty, for you to long for a love you will never have." My throat tightened, but I forced out the rest of the sentence. "The very love you threw away." I didn't wait to see the effect of my words. I spun around and stalked up the stairs. Each step felt like I was fighting my way through a blizzard, equal parts numb and raw. By the time I stopped in front of my door, my legs could barely hold me up. "Don't come to me again with half-truths and pretty regrets," I said quietly. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Even if by some impossible twist of fate we were bound by the moon goddess herself, that wouldn't change anything. Some wounds aren't meant to heal. I heard him exhale, long and broken, as I opened and closed the door behind me. It shut with a heavy finality that echoed through the foyer like thunder rolling away. I leaned back against it, my pulse still racing, my fingers trembling slightly as I pressed them against the cool wood. For a long moment I didn't move, didn't breathe. The air in the house felt too thick, too full of everything I wanted to ignore, his scent, his voice, the look in his eyes when he said, "You, Mom?" Daniel's voice floated faintly from the kitchen. I swallowed hard, straightening. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I called back, my voice unsteady. "Go wash up for dinner, okay?" "Is Dad gone?" My throat constricted. "Yeah, hon." There was silence, and then, "Are you okay, Mom?" A lump formed, blocking what little space was left in my airway. "I'm okay, baby," I choked out, wishing it was true. Silence stretched again, and I half expected him to appear in front of me and see that the very last thing I was fine. "I'm not that hungry, Mom. The cereal was enough. I'll go get ready for bed." And then the sounds of him padding up the stairs filtered into my ears. I sagged against the door. Thank the goddess. Guilt and relief tangled with the other chaotic emotions inside me. Of course, I wanted to make dinner for my son, but the mere thought of doing anything other than collapsing into a heap felt impossible. And that was how, with my back pressed against the door, I sank to the floor, drawing my knees to me. I let the word out in a harsh whisper. "Alina." Her presence stirred inside me like a ripple over water. "You heard all of it," I said inwardly. "Tell me I'm not losing my mind. Tell me he's wrong." For a few seconds there was silence. Then, gently, "You're not losing your mind," she murmured, her voice a low hum threaded through my veins. "But I don't know if he's wrong either." I threw my head back, my eyes squeezed so tight, little starbursts of light bloomed behind my lids. "You don't know?" I asked aloud, incredulous. "You're supposed to know." "You're my wolf." Her tone softened. "I told you, Sarah, I can't know till I have my full strength, till you can shift." That hollow ache opened in my chest again, the same pain I'd felt every time the absence of my wolf grew too great to bear. "I can feel you and you can feel me," she continued gently, "but the threads that tie us to others, the pull of a mate, the hum of destiny, They're faint, like echoes behind a locked door. So you're saying it could be possible? The words sounded preposterous coming out of my mouth. Kieran could actually be my mate. He could be, Alina admitted after a long silence. But does it matter? That question sliced straight through me. It mattered. It mattered a fucking lot. Helplessness and disbelief collided within me. I couldn't imagine anything crueler than learning that the connection I'd longed for all my life was with the person who'd caused me the most pain in the world. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the frantic beat beneath my ribs. Dread and longing pulsed in equal measure. I don't want it to matter, I said quietly. I don't want anything to tie me to him again. Then it doesn't have to, she said simply. The moon goddess, in her infinite wisdom, might weave the fabric of fate, but she doesn't force us to wear them. Not anymore. You have the right to choose, Sarah. You've earned it. Tears burned the back of my eyes before I could stop them. I suffered for 10 years, Alina. 10 years of being unloved, unseen, unchosen. If this is fate, then it's cruel. Fate can be cruel, she agreed, but it can also be rewritten. I closed my eyes, breathing in the faint scent of sugar and milk from Daniel's cereal. I could hear him clanging around upstairs, the sound of water running. He must have been brushing his teeth. He was oddly meticulous about that ritual. 10 strokes up and down, 10 strokes side to side, 5 strokes in each corner. I felt myself relax at the thought of my son. That was my anchor, my purpose. Not Kieran's regrets, not the tangled strings of some flawed divine bond. You're right, I whispered. Even if the moon goddess herself carved our names into the stars, I would still say no. Alina didn't argue. She just hummed quietly, proud, perhaps, or simply at peace with my decision. Still, as I walked toward Daniel's room to check on him, I couldn't ignore the faint shimmer of electricity beneath my skin, the echo of Kieran's touch on my wrist, the spark that shouldn't have been there. It pulsed like a secret heartbeat, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't quite silence it. Kieran's povey. I didn't move for a long time after the door slammed shut. The sound of it reverberated through my bones, echoing in time with my thundering heartbeat. I stood there in Sarah's driveway, the night pressing cold and unforgiving around me, staring at the door that separated me from everything I wanted, everything I'd destroyed. I clenched my fists, feeling Ashar pacing inside my mind, his restlessness rattling through my body, his wounded pride twisting in my gut. You had one chance, he growled, low and feral. One damn chance to make it right, and you botched it. I didn't botch it, I muttered under my breath, even though I knew that I had, in fact, royally botched it. She doesn't believe me. Why should she? Ashar's voice rose to a roar that vibrated through my skull. You hurt her, again and again. You refused to mark her, even when I urged you time and time again. You were stubborn, you refused to listen, and now you're shocked that she turned her back? I gritted my teeth. You think I don't know all that? You think I don't feel enough like shit without you berating me? Ashar didn't answer. His fury burned hotter, heavier. My chest felt too tight to breathe, and what little air that permeated my lungs reeked of lavender and regret. Her scent, her rejection. It clung to me like smoke, smothering reason, feeding the thing that wanted to claw its way free. My fingers curled involuntarily, nails gouging blood from my palms. Every muscle screamed for violent release, begged for destruction, for anything brutal enough to drown out the chaos hammering through my skull. She turned away from us. Ashar's snarl was guttural and raw. She turned away, Kieran. I know, I hissed. Because of you. I know. I roared. But knowing didn't ease the pressure, only tightened it. My pulse beat erratically, too fast, too loud, as if my heart wanted to tear itself apart just to escape the cage of my chest. The world around me blurred. Trees, wind, the faint lights spilling from Sarah's windows, all distorted by the red haze clouding my vision. Ashar's energy seared through me, wild and uncontrollable. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat of fury, every breath struggled between restraint and surrender. My jaw locked painfully. Calm the fuck down, I ground out. But Ashar was beyond reason, his emotions a violent tide pulling me under. My grief was his grief, my pain his own, but magnified, raw, primal. My skin felt too tight, too fragile to contain him. My bones ached from the effort of keeping him in. Finally, I couldn't stand the confinement of my human skin anymore. Logic dictated that I shouldn't do this in neutral territory, let alone in Sarah's fucking driveway. But logic had never been strong enough to hold back Ashar. The ground trembled as the shift ripped through me, violent, unstoppable. The sound tore through the night, bones cracking, muscles stretching, fur bursting from flesh. For a split second, I thought I heard my own scream echo in the air. Then Ashar took over completely, and everything went silent except the thunder of his rage. The night exploded into sharper color and scent. Ashar surged forward, enormous and wild, a blur of golden fur and obsidian eyes. He didn't hesitate. He ran. The forest welcomed him, our sanctuary, our punishment. Trees blurred past as we tore through them, his fury burning with every stride. I could feel it in my veins, his guilt, his longing. We howled once, loud enough to shake the valley. The howl fractured the silence, a sound of fury and heartbreak that rippled through the mountains like thunder rolling off stone. Ashar's rage was a wildfire. It wasn't just running through the forest, it was devouring it. He rampaged like a hurricane, tearing through trees as though they were nothing but paper, massive paws striking earth hard enough to crack roots. Splinters flew, bark shredded beneath his claws. The forest floor was a blur of crushed leaves and upturned soil. He was out of control. We were out of control. The deeper he pushed, the more I recognized the land underfoot. The scent in the wind, iron, pine, cedar, was unmistakable. Nightfang territory. My stomach dropped. Shit. I tried to wrestle back some measure of command, to remind him we weren't alone here, that this wasn't just any wilderness. It was one thing to rage, it was another thing to destroy my own territory. But wasn't that what I did? Destroy things I was supposed to protect? Sarah's voice echoed, a painful taunt. That's your MO, isn't it? Ashar, stop! I tried to project calm, but he wasn't listening. He hadn't been listening since the moment Sarah closed that door. He lunged at a tree trunk, slamming his shoulder into it until it snapped with a deafening crack. The sound reverberated through my ribs. He ripped the pieces apart, claws gouging deep grooves into the wood, as if tearing it down could quiet the ache inside him. She was ours, he roared inside my mind. Ours, and you threw her away. I flinched as pain seared down our shared spine. Every muscle ached with the strain of his rage. I didn't mean to. Intent means nothing when the result is the same. Another tree fell. Birds scattered into the night sky, wings slicing through the silence we'd shattered. The echo of Ashar's growl followed them, low and guttural, vibrating the air like the growl of a storm about to break. I tried to pull at the tether that connected us, my last thread of control, but it snapped back, biting into me with the force of his fury. He wasn't going to stop, not until something, or someone, made him. Gavin, I growled through the mind link, I need you. His response was instant, the pulse of another mind brushing against mine. Where the hell are you? His voice was sharp, alert. Half the Northern Patrol just heard that howl. What's going on? I pushed through the chaos to form coherent words. It's Ashar. I stopped, wincing as we collided with another trunk, sending bark and branches flying. He's out of control. A pause. Then where? Near the border, northwest ridge, past the old stream. I could feel his frustration spike through the link. I can't just have 3 weeks to myself and my family? The image of my beta, holding his wife and newborn daughter, stabbed a bolt of blinding agony through me. Ashar threw his head back and howled, long and loud. Gavin sighed. I'm on my way. Gavin's pove. Lydia was setting a cup of tea on the small stool beside me when I swore softly, careful not to wake the sleeping bundle cradled in my arms after an hour of rocking her to sleep. My wife looked up at the sound of my voice, her expression soft but knowing. As soon as I slanted an apologetic look her way, she smiled faintly. Your alpha needs you. I'm on leave, damn it. My grip on my daughter, Mira, tightened. I don't want to leave you. Go, she said gently, brushing a kiss over my jaw. He wouldn't call you unless it was serious. I looked at her, guilt pricking under my ribs. You just gave birth 3 days ago, Lai. I shouldn't. Her hand pressed over mine, warm and steady. You're his beta, Gav. That means he's your #1 priority. I knew that when I said I do. I cupped her face, running my thumb along her cheekbone. You're my #1 priority, I told her firmly. Then Mira. Kieran will always come in 3rd place. She laughed softly as she gently lifted the tiny bundle out of my arms. Go? I was out of the house a heartbeat later, yanking my shirt off as I ran and shifting before my feet even hit the tree line. The world blurred into scents and sounds, the metallic tang of blood in the wind, the rip of claws against bark, the echoing growl that made my wolf, Xander, bare his teeth. The scent trail led me up through the ridges where the earth had been violently scarred. Claw marks gouged deep into the rock face, the scent of fury and despair soaked into the soil. When I reached the clearing, the sight hit me like a punch. Ashar's hulking golden form was a cyclone of violence. Ripping, tearing, lashing out at nothing. Trees lay splintered. The ground itself looked mauled. Every motion screamed of guilt and self-loathing. "Ashar," I projected through the mind link, Xander stepping cautiously from the shadows. "Enough. You'll destroy yourself." Ashar's head snapped up, and I swore internally. His eyes only ever burned gold when he was displaying a gargantuan amount of power, or lack of control. His chest heaved with every growl, each breath steaming in the cold night air. "Finally," he snarled, and lunged. I braced. I'd known this was why I'd been summoned. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for punishment. Our bodies collided with bone-jarring force, the impact echoing through the clearing. Xander met him head-on, claws flashing. We grappled, rolled, and broke apart, only to crash together again. The scent of blood thickened as fur and dust swirled through the air. Ashar struck like a storm, relentless, blistering. His movements were a blur of raw instinct, no strategy, no restraint. Every slash, every bite carried the weight of something deeper than rage. I ducked a swipe that would have torn my throat open, countering with a shoulder slam that sent him stumbling back. But he was on me again in seconds, moving too fast for a creature his size. Xander barely twisted aside in time. Claws raked across my shoulder, searing fire through muscle and bone. The pain snapped through both of us like lightning, but it only sharpened my focus. "He's not trying to kill you," Xander growled inside my head. "He's trying to kill himself." "Sure seems like he's trying to kill me too," I thought bitterly. I slammed back into him, jaws snapping, forcing him down. The earth cracked beneath our combined weight, dust rising in a thick haze. Ashar bucked violently, throwing me off with a surge of power that made the air tremble. He was magnificent, terrifying, every line of muscle carved with fury, every breath a growl. His golden fur was streaked with blood, his own and mine, and his eyes blazed like molten sunlight through a storm. This was unlike any sparring match we'd ever had. This was destruction made flesh. "You're going to burn yourself out," I snarled aloud, half shifting, my voice roughened by the strain. "Kieran, call him back before he destroys what's left of you." But there was no answer, only a low, guttural snarl that made the trees shudder. Ashar's howl broke the night again, raw anguish echoing down the ridges. Then he lunged once more, claws colliding with my chest. I hit the ground hard, the air knocked from my lungs. Before I could recover, he was over me, fangs bared, inches from my throat. And then, hesitation. His body trembled. The golden light in his eyes flickered, once, twice, before dimming like a dying ember. His breathing came ragged, desperate, as though the weight of what he'd done finally crashed down on him all at once. The rage bled out slowly, his massive frame sagged, claws digging into the earth for balance. Then his head dropped, pressing into the dirt, and a low, broken sound escaped him, less of a growl, closer to a sob. I didn't move, I waited. When he shifted, it wasn't explosive. It was weary, bones reformed with dull cracks, fur receding back into bloodied skin. The golden wolf dissolved into a man, shaking, bruised, half-naked, half-wild. Kieran collapsed onto his hands and knees, gasping for air, the moonlight cutting harshly across his torn back. His knuckles were raw, streaked with blood and dirt. For a long moment he didn't speak, just stared at the ground, chest rising and falling too fast, eyes vacant. The forest was quiet now, eerily so. The scent of blood and splintered wood still lingered, but the storm had passed. And Kieran Blackthorn, the golden alpha who commanded armies, now sat slumped in the wreckage, trembling like a man who'd lost his entire world. Gavin's Pove. By the time we made our way to the pack infirmary, the forest was preternaturally still, as if the storm that had torn through it had never come. The trees stood silent again, but the air still held the ghost of violence. Charred earth, splintered bark, blood. The quiet after carnage. We looked like hell, ragged, bloody, and utterly spent, as we sank onto the stone bench in the infirmary courtyard. Moonlight caught the edges of Kieran's shredded skin and the sheen of sweat on him. He didn't look like an alpha then, just a man gutted by his own mistakes. I grabbed a first aid box and a spare set of clothes from the store. When I came back, he hadn't moved, staring at nothing, jaw tight, eyes hollow. Ashar had receded deep within him, but the wolf's unease hadn't vanished. I could feel it simmering beneath the surface. The night air stung against the open cuts on my arms and legs, and the faint metallic tang of blood clung to our skin. I began cleaning the gashes along my forearm, the sting of antiseptic grounding me in the moment. When I handed Kieran an alcohol wipe, he just shook his head, too proud or too tired, I wasn't sure which, and I didn't press him. Our wolves would heal it all by morning anyway. No bruises, the faintest of scars. Barely any proof of the chaos that had torn through the mountains. That was the cruel irony of it. The body would forget what the heart never could. For a long time, the only sound between us was the faint chorus of crickets and cicadas, a fragile attempt by nature to return to normal. I knew better than to fill the silence. Kieran wasn't ready, and pushing him would only drive him deeper into that spiral. It took nearly an eternity before he exhaled, a long, weighted breath that seemed to deflate something inside him. He stared down at his hands, at the blood crusted over his knuckles. "I broke it off with Celeste," he said hoarsely. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. "Congratulations" nearly slipped out, but I bit my tongue just in time. "Why?" I asked instead, quietly. He shook his head, sweat-damp hair sticking to his temples. "It's not important." Another exhale, longer, harsher, like he was expelling poison from his lungs. "I never should have gotten with her to begin with. And what did Sarah have to say about the news? That was the real wound. Beneath the blood, the sweat, the exhaustion, her scent lingered. Lavender and heartbreak." Kieran stiffened instantly, his entire body coiling like a drawn bow. I held my breath, weighing whether I had the energy to survive another round with Ashar. But then he spoke. The words were strained. "She rejected me." I frowned. "Rejected you? What the hell did you say to her?" He didn't look up, his fingers flexed and released. "That I was sorry, that I wanted her back." "You fucking—" This time I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. His shoulders vibrated with a bitter, humorless laugh. "Go on, say it. I'm a fucking idiot." "Put yourself in her shoes," I said softly. "You spent a decade of marriage loving her sister, divorced her as soon as said sister came back. When that fell apart, you ran back to the woman you'd broken just as she was starting to move on with her life. What did you expect, Kieran? A welcome banner?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. The great alpha of Nightfang bowed under the weight of his own remorse. "I fucked up," he declared stiffly. No argument there. "What do I do, Gavin?" His voice cracked, barely, but enough that it made my chest tighten. His eyes found mine, hollow with pain that looked centuries old. I'd known him since we were pups. I'd seen him take blades to the chest, arrows through the ribs, and still stand tall. But this was different. This was the kind of wound no healer could stitch shut. Kieran Blackthorn was the strongest alpha I'd ever known, but he absolutely, utterly sucked when it came to matters of the heart. It was humbling. I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "What is this really about?" I asked carefully. "Why the sudden change of heart toward her?" His jaw tightened, the muscle twitching. "She might be my mate." My eyes widened. "Oh shit. How are you sure?" He hissed through his teeth, turning away. "It doesn't even matter. She doesn't give a fuck. She wouldn't even hear me out." "She doesn't owe you anything," I said gently. "Not belief, not forgiveness, not even a conversation." "I know," his voice cracked. "But how can she ignore it, Gav? I feel it. It's not just attraction, it's something deeper. Right now, it's unsteady, but it's there. It's undeniable. How can she pretend she doesn't feel it too?" I gave a humorless smile. "Fun fact, before Lydia, I met my fated mate." His head whipped toward me. "What?" I nodded. "Yeah, we felt the spark, the pull, the whole divine setup, but there was a catch. She was married, with 2 kids. He blinked, stunned. "You never told me that." "There wasn't much to tell," I shrugged. "I could have marked her anyway, claimed what the moon goddess had given me, but what would that have made me? Some entitled bastard who thought fate excused cruelty? I couldn't do that to her. She was happy with her family, so I walked away, severed the bond. It almost killed me." I paused, letting the quiet settle. But then I met Lydia. She didn't care that we weren't fated. She chose me, Kieran. That's worth more than any goddess-given bond. He was silent, his face unreadable. Finally, "What are you saying? I should give up." "I'm saying," I replied softly, "you need to figure out whether you want Sarah because she's your mate or because she's Sarah." He frowned. "What's the difference?" "One's love," I said simply. "The other's duty dressed as destiny." For a second he said nothing. I continued. "You keep talking about regret, fate, bonds, but none of that matters until you decide what you want. Do you want Sarah back because you feel guilty that you may have mismanaged your mate, or because you genuinely miss and want her?" A shudder ran through him. "Fuck, I miss her so much." His hand came up, pressing against his chest as if trying to dig out a thorn lodged there. The aroma of her cooking, the scent of her perfume lingering after she leaves a room, the way she hums when she thinks I can't hear from my office, the way she laughs when she's with Daniel. His voice cracked, raw. "It's a physical fucking ache." Grief etched his features as he confessed, the pain undiluted and new. Despite everything, I smiled faintly. "Good." He shot me a disbelieving look. "Good? At least now you know," I said. "For 10 years you've lived in confusion, wanting what you didn't have, dismissing what you did. It's late, but clarity's better than cowardice." He huffed a bitter laugh. "A lot of good that's doing me now." "First things first," I said. "Stop taking your anger out on the ground and your very loyal, very amazing beta." He snorted, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. "Thank you," he said softly, "for coming." I nodded. "Of course." "And—" He slanted a heavy look at me. "About earlier, you know I would never." I nodded firmly. "I know." He exhaled in relief. "You're bleeding for all the wrong reasons," I added. He laughed again, but it was a broken, glass-sharp sound. "I'm bleeding because I deserve to." I shook my head. "No, you're bleeding because you're trying to undo 10 years in one night. And that's not how healing works. You can't brute force redemption." Kieran's shoulders slumped, every ounce of fight draining from him. His voice came out small, foreign almost. "So what do I do?" I reached out and clasped his shoulder, firm and steady. "You fight, but not yourself this time. You fight for her. You pick up the pieces with the same hands that broke them, and you do your best to put them all back together. Not through punishment, but through patience." He swallowed hard. "And if that doesn't work?" "Then you respect her choice," I said quietly, "and you learn to live with what's left. Otherwise, the cycle of hurt will never end. Celeste, Sarah, Daniel, yourself, you'll leave only anguish in your wake." For a long while, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled the leaves, the moon hung low, pale and indifferent. Then Kieran let out a ragged breath, barely more than a whisper. "Fuck!" I huffed out something between a sigh and a laugh. "Yeah," I murmured. "That about sums it up." And for once, the Alpha of Nightfang didn't argue. He just sat there, head bowed, heart cracked open beneath the moonlight. Celeste's Povee. The whiskey burned down my throat like liquid fire. I slammed the glass onto the counter and motioned for another. The bartender hesitated, probably because I'd already had too many, but one glare from me, and he poured anyway. Bass thumped through Luna Noir's overhead speakers, vibrating against the wood and metal like a pulse I couldn't silence. Around me, laughter and wolf scent mingled thickly with alcohol and desperation. I hated it. I hated all of it. The stench of weak wolves pretending to matter. The way they looked at me now, like I was just another pretty mess, not the Lockwood princess I was, not the Blackthorn queen I was supposed to be. My reflection in the mirror behind the bar looked like a stranger. Smudged lipstick, dark-ringed eyes too bright, too sharp, too furious. I barely recognized myself. My mother's words still rang in my ears, louder than the music. "You've done enough damage, Celeste," she'd said, her hands shaking as she gathered up the cookie mess her graceless grandson had made. "I'm your daughter," I had screamed. "You never said that to Sarah when she ruined everything." "Sarah didn't ruin anything." She'd glared at me. "I'm just sorry it took so long to see that. You just can't stand that the world stopped revolving around you." "You pretentious bitch," I'd spat out. "You put a crown on my head and now are shocked when I want to rule?" My cheeks still throbbed from the slap she'd given me, and the memory cut sharper than the drink. I'd hurled her treasured crystal vase, Father's gift for their 20th anniversary, against the wall, shards scattering as I stormed out of the manor. I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to. And my mother didn't make any attempt to follow or call after me. Not like she'd called for Sarah. That memory burned too. The image of my bitch sister leaving, her perfect little son clutching her hand, mother teary-eyed behind them. Now here I was. I couldn't call Ethan. He was on Sarah's side too. Every time I dialed Kieran, it went straight to voicemail, and I would sooner slit my own throat than have Abby and Emma witness my humiliating fall from grace, so I was all alone. The great Celeste Lockwood, future Luna of nothing. On the TV above the bar, a broadcast replay of the stupid fucking LST that people wouldn't shut up about flickered. Of course, in the universal conspiracy to mock me, the screen cut to Sarah and her team, and there my sister stood, serene and composed, her fair hair gleaming under the lights as she stood in that champion's stance, commanding respect she didn't deserve. The caption read, "Lockwood heiress reclaims her power." My blood boiled. What a load of bullshit. "She's not the heiress," I muttered, gripping my glass so tight my knuckles went white. Fuck. Everything was upside down. I was supposed to be that. Me? "Talking to yourself, sweetheart," a voice drawled from behind me. I turned. 3 men leaned against the bar, all broad-shouldered and grinning, the kind of grin that made my skin crawl. Low-ranked wolves whose inebriation made them stupid. Ugh. Luna Noir was scraping the barrel in terms of clientele. "Leave me alone," I said flatly, turning back to my drink. But they didn't. One slid closer. "A pretty thing like you shouldn't be drinking alone. What pack are you from?" "The one that would tear your throat out if you touched me." I didn't even look at him. I ignored the small stab of pain when I realized I wasn't even sure Frostbane wolves would actually ever come to my aid if I was in trouble. "Now get lost." That should have done it, but my tone, icy, sharp, just made them laugh. "Feisty," one said, fingers brushing my arm. A shiver of revulsion spread through my body from the point of contact. "Come on, sweetheart, we're just trying to be friendly." "Don't touch me." I shoved his hand off, but the movement made my vision tilt. Too much whiskey. At the spike of panic, my wolf stirred faintly under my skin, but didn't respond. I'd been suppressing her for almost a year, and now she was barely a whisper inside me. The man's smile twisted. "Don't play hard to get. It's not hot." "Back off," I snapped, but my voice shook. The bar was too loud, the lights too dim. A few other patrons noticed, but looked away. No one wanted to get involved in a wolf fight after dark. One of them grabbed my wrist, yanking me from the stool. Pain shot through my arm. "Let go," I hissed, trying to twist free. But the alcohol made me sluggish. Their laughter turned cruel. "You think you're too good for us, huh?" The second man jeered. "What are you, some alpha's brat?" "And sister and fiancé, you dick." But my tongue was too heavy to form the words. Maybe I should have tattooed my forehead like Alara had suggested. I stumbled, heart pounding as the room spun. My wolf whimpered, powerless. I swung wildly, hitting one square in the chest, but he barely flinched. Then, just as panic clawed up my throat, threatening to cut off my air supply, the atmosphere shifted. A dark, commanding growl ripped through the space, low and lethal. "Touch her again," a voice said from the shadows, "and I'll break every bone in your worthless body." The grip on my wrist vanished instantly. The men froze, and my breath hitched as the crowd parted, revealing the man who'd spoken. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Of all the people in the world who could have walked into the bar I chose to wallow in tonight. No, it wasn't possible. It couldn't be him. My pulse stuttered, and yet it was. Serafina's Poviv. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kieran's face, the flash of agony in his eyes when I told him I didn't want him. The desperation in his voice echoed in my mind, over and over. "I just want you," until exhaustion finally dragged me under. But even then, sleep wasn't peace. Somewhere in the distance, an anguished howl had ripped through the night, raw, wounded, relentless. I wasn't sure if it was real or something my heart conjured from guilt, but it lodged itself in my mind like an echo I couldn't silence, vibrating through my bones and skin till it felt like it was coming out of me. Morning took forever to come, but finally, warm, bright light filtered in through my blinds. The faint scent of vanilla and pancakes greeted me before I even opened my eyes. My lids were heavy as I blinked awake, groggy and slightly disoriented, more exhausted than when I'd fallen asleep. I was just stretching, wondering why Daniel's side of the bed was empty when the door gently creaked open. "Morning, Mom," my son said shyly from the doorway, flour dusting his cheek. The sight of him, his bright eyes, his happy little grin, warmed something in me that the night had frozen. "I made breakfast." I blinked, stifling a yawn. "You cooked?" He nodded proudly. "Your cooking always makes me feel better, so I wanted to do the same for you." "Oh, baby." I sat up and spread my arms open. He didn't hesitate as he moved into the circle of my embrace. I hugged him tight, breathing in the sugar and butter scent mixed with his. "Thank you, my love." The pancakes, it turns out, were crunchy on the outside and mushy on the inside, but I wolfed it all down, and honestly, it made me feel so much better. After breakfast, we dressed quickly. Daniel had an early alpha training course at Christian's estate, something he was both nervous and excited about. I knew Christian had started teaching him gradually on Kieran's island, but when he called to arrange this particular course, I had been a little miffed that I wasn't included in the decision to start alpha training officially. But I'd long since learned to pick my battles when it came to the Blackthorns. The car ride was peaceful. Just the hum of the engine and Daniel's chatter about wolf formations and tactics. His enthusiasm was contagious, and I could feel my mood getting brighter and brighter. Christian and Leona's mansion stood tall and silver under the morning sun, a banner with Nightfang's crest, a black wolf's head snarling beneath a silver crescent moon, framed by pale laurels and set on a moonlit shield, fluttering in the wind. Over the decade of my marriage with Kieran, I'd only had cause to visit here once or twice. None of those visits was welcoming, and each left me wary of the next. I knew that logically, Kieran had no reason to be in his parents' home, but that didn't stop the tight knot of anxiety from forming in my stomach as we stopped in front of the grand stairs. Leona met us at the front steps, the picture of grace and perfection. Instinctively, I braced for her usual coolness, but her expression softened when she saw me. "Serafina," she said, "you look well." "Thank you," I replied carefully. "So do you." She nodded, glancing at Daniel, and stretched out a hand to him. "Hello, my little alpha." He darted forward and hugged her tightly, vibrating with excitement and nerves. "Where's Grandpa?" Leona chuckled. "He's already in the south courtyard waiting for you. Go on, darling." Daniel hopped once and turned to me. "Bye, Mom." He took off at once, and I watched him go, my chest swelling with pride and just a hint of trepidation. Don't grow up too fast, I thought earnestly. At Daniel's departure, an awkward air settled between me and Leona. Unbidden, I remembered our last conversation, how I told her firmly that I was over Kieran. I wondered what she would think now if she knew what had transpired between me and her son last night. The stabbing ache in my chest at the thought of Kieran was my cue to leave. "Well," I nodded and turned away. But she called after me before I'd taken a step. "Sarah, wait." I paused and turned back, cautious. She approached, hesitated, then pulled a small, wrapped box from behind her back and extended it to me. "This is for you. A belated congratulations on your victory at the LST and an apology." I stared at the package like she was handing me a grenade. "Leona, you don't have to." "I do." Her eyes met mine, unflinching. "I was wrong about you, Serafina. We all were. You deserved better, both from the pack and from the rest of us." What the actual hell was going on? First Kieran last night and now this? Did I somehow trip and fall into an alternate, upside-down dimension? "Please," Leona pressed. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. I took the gift slowly, my throat tightening as I opened it. Inside was a silver pendant, intricately engraved with Nightfang's crest. On the back, my name was inscribed. What the hell was I supposed to do with this? I was no longer a member of their pack, not like I truly was to begin with. I didn't want anything tying me to Kieran, damn it. Regardless, I inclined my head and said softly, "Thank you." She smiled, small, genuine. "No, Sarah, thank you." With everything that happened lately, it felt oddly jarring to be going camping with my teammates. It was an OTS-sponsored retreat for the winning team, and they'd been planning the trip since after the LST, while I was drowning in my personal drama. It was a little surreal to consider that it had barely been a week, and so much had happened since then. I definitely needed a distraction from the roller coaster my life had become. By the time I reached the campsite, the forest was alive with laughter and wood smoke, and my squad mates were scattered in different stations. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt for days. "Sarah!" Judy ran up and pulled me into a hug. "You actually came." "We thought you'd bail." I frowned. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "You haven't exactly been active in the group the last couple of days." Guilt pricked me. "You're right, I'm sorry. It's okay. Being a hotshot champion is a daunting task." She winked. "We get it." I laughed, feeling the first threads of tension unravel. She threw her arm over my shoulder and led me towards the rest of the group. "Come on, you're the last to arrive. We need to share duties among the 6 of us." My brows furrowed. "The 6 of us?" She smirked, nudging me mischievously. "If you opened the group chat, you'd know about our last-minute invite." "Who?" The answer came before I could finish the question. He stood at the edge of the campsite, arms laden with firewood, framed by the shifting dapple of sunlight through the trees. Our eyes locked at the same time, and the previously loosening threads of tension rewound themselves tightly around my heart. Lucian. So much for a break. Celeste's povie. The first thing I felt was the weight in my skull. Heavy, pounding, like someone armed with dumbbells was trying to punch their way out from behind my eyes. The second thing was panic. My limbs were tangled in silk sheets, in a bed that wasn't mine, gigantic, luxurious. Sterile chill from a temperature-controlled suite curled around my skin. My eyelids felt like they had been welded shut, mascara stiff against skin still tight from dried tears. I forced them open and winced, instantly regretting the action when pain screamed in my skull. I pushed myself up on weak arms, pressing one hand to my throbbing temple. I blinked, taking in the room through blurry vision. White ceiling, gold-lit marble, velvet drapes, polished wood. Confusion, threaded with icy dread, tightened around my insides when my eyes dropped to a towel draped across the chair and recognized the crest. The Vesper Grand Hotel. LA's werewolf community's most ridiculously opulent monument to wealth and prestige. My favorite hotel. What the hell? With that, the memory of last night slammed into my aching skull. Luna Noir, whiskey. The 3 wolves. "Come on, sweetheart, we're just trying to be friendly. Don't touch me. Don't play hard to get, it's not hot. No, 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 no." Nausea roared with panic as my fingers scrambled over my body, dress still on, hair undone but not trashed. No soreness, no bruises, no unfamiliar scent on my skin. I hadn't been touched. Relief, sharp and humiliatingly vulnerable, washed over me in a wave so strong I sagged against the pillows piled behind me and closed my eyes. With that, more flashes flickered across my memory. Touch her again, and I'll break every bone in your worthless body. My eyes flew open again, wide. The voice echoed in my mind. Dark, dangerous, familiar. And then there was the face. One I thought I'd buried with the severing of our bond. But that couldn't have been real. Right? I pressed my palm to my chest, half expecting to feel the echo of him still there. But there was only hollowness, muted and distant. The mate bond had been cut clean. There was no tug left, no warmth. Surely I had been mistaken. Too much whiskey. I'd had a long, awful day before then. Yes, that had to be it. A soft electronic beep echoed from the doorway. My head snapped up as the suite door swung open, and Brett Mercer stepped inside. Time froze. The room detonated around me as shock extinguished every other emotion. I closed my eyes and squeezed tight, despite the sharp pain the action elicited. I counted softly to 3. That was what one did when one hallucinated, no? When I opened my eyes again, though, he was still there, my mate. Well, ex-mate, and he looked wrong. Not the boy who once knelt at my feet with worship in his gaze. Not the desperate man begging for scraps of my affection. Not even the bitter, broken mate who'd swallowed wolfsbane to completely sever our bond before I could destroy him further. This Brett stood taller, cavalier. A cold kind of self-assuredness sat in his posture like a second skin. His clothes were still simple, black jeans, a fitted dark shirt, but they fit differently now. Like they were chosen, not grabbed from whatever thrift store he could afford. Broader shoulders pulled against the fabric, the sleeves were rolled up, exposing strong veins and bulging muscles I did not recognize. A gold, expensive-looking watch glinted around his wrist. His jaw was sharper, softened by a shadow of stubble. His hair was slightly longer, tousled in a way that seemed intentional instead of neglected. He stopped when he saw me awake. There was no flicker of relief. No, thank gods you're okay, or tortured pining. Just a cool, distant once-over. His eyes, honey brown I'd always thought were too expressive, were unreadable. "You're up," he said flatly, closing the door behind him. The sound of his voice was like a slap to the face. Just those two words and a flood of memory, of buried past, threatened to drown me. I dragged my chin up. "You." My voice was hoarse, my throat tight. That was really you. The gruff, commanding voice. The way the wolves had immediately scattered. It was impossible. Brett Mercer did not carry that kind of authority. And yet, he shrugged once, like rescuing me from 3 potentially dangerous wolves in a bar at 3 a.m. was no different from picking up groceries. "What happened?" I demanded. "You were about 5 seconds from getting dragged into an alley," he said flatly, crossing to the mini-fridge like I wasn't even worth facing for this conversation. I intervened. I hated how my pulse stuttered with humiliation. He retrieved a bottle of water from the fridge, and I automatically stretched my hand out. He paused, arched a brow, and then took a long drink of the water. My jaw unhinged. I didn't know if I was enraged by his blatant dismissal or mesmerized by the way his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Had he always been so suave? So smooth? Had his presence always commanded a room? I snatched my gaze before he could catch me looking. I was going out of my damn mind. That was for sure. This was Brett, for goddess' sake. "And then you brought me here?" I said, my voice still hoarse. "To this suite?" "It was the closest hotel," he said, casually. I laughed, ignoring the scraping against my throat. "You expect me to believe you could afford this place?" We were in the presidential suite. It cost more than some PAC's yearly revenue. Brett rolled his eyes and pulled out a black card from his back pocket, tapping it on the marble counter. "No, but you could." My eyes narrowed on the familiar card. Then my head swiveled to the nearby chaise where my purse lay, unzipped. "You used that?" My voice shot higher. His brows lifted lazily. "You had it. I used it. You didn't wake up on the street in a pool of your own vomit. You're welcome." The laughter that bubbled out of me held absolutely no humor. I shook my head, staring at the black card, Kieran's black card, between Brett's fingers like a reminder of everything I had lost. But in a way, it brought everything into perspective. Of course, Brett couldn't afford this room. He once slept in his car for a week straight because he got kicked out of his apartment for being 6 months behind on the rent. I stood, head light. "So you're still as broke as ever. That hasn't changed." His jaw flexed slightly, but his voice stayed calm. Jumping to conclusions was always your favorite pastime. The casual familiarity in his tone gave me whiplash. Which was he? Distant? Familiar? I crossed my arms, steadying myself with pride. "Let me guess, you think saving me gives you a chance?" I said with acid sweetness. "You think I'll fall to my knees at your feet in gratitude?" A thin, almost bored smile touched his lips. "Don't flatter yourself." My pride flared. "Oh, please. You booked the presidential suite at the exact same hotel I used to talk about nonstop when we were together. Don't insult me by pretending that's a coincidence." He crossed his arms along his chest, and my eyes were drawn to the way his muscles rippled. When did those come in? "It is, believe it or not, Celeste." The way he said my name, flat, like it meant nothing, sent an unexpected sting through my chest. "I don't," I snapped. "And if you think you'll get another shot at being my mate—" "We're not mates," he cut in, voice cool. "Not anymore, remember?" The reminder sliced sharper than it should have. "We had a bond," I snapped. "Once, yes," he said calmly, "but you smothered and poisoned it until it died a slow, agonizing death." Anger surged hot beneath my skin. "Don't act like you were faultless. You were always jealous, weak. You couldn't handle what being with me meant." "And you couldn't handle the fact that someone loved you more than power," he said quietly. That shut me up. My lips parted, a surge of indignant retorts rising to the surface. But no words came. Brett's voice stayed leveled, emotionless. "Relax, Celeste. I'm not here to win you back. I don't want you." The blow landed so hard my ears rang. "Get out," I hissed, unsure if the dull ache was my wounded pride or something else. "This suite is booked under my account, courtesy of my fiancé. You've done your good deed. Now leave." I folded my arms and forced a smirk. "And next time, try to be a little more subtle with your pining." His eyes darkened, not hurt, just calm irritation. Like I was a yapping chihuahua he had no patience for, Not that I owe you an explanation, but I'm in town on business. I stopped for a drink and saw what was happening. That's all. It could have been anyone in trouble. It's just unfortunate that it was you." My eyes flared. "Unfortunate?" I shrieked. "I only stayed," he continued, like I hadn't spoken, because I sensed Karis in distress. I stiffened at the mention of my wolf. Gods, I hadn't heard her name in ages. It sounded simultaneously intimate and foreign on his tongue. The hollowness in my chest that I'd gotten used to suddenly began to throb. "You sealed her," Brett said, the first sign of emotion creeping into his voice. Agitation. "What the fuck, Celeste?" "Stay out of it," I spat. "Are you really that ashamed of me?" he asked quietly. "So much you'd rather smother your own wolf than ever reveal you once mated with me?" "That was a mistake," I hissed. "I'm going to be Kieran Blackthorn's Luna. I can't have a tainted past." For the first time, his expression shifted. Something dark, something disappointed. "Tainted," he repeated softly. "That's what loving me was." I swallowed, couldn't answer. He nodded once. "Got it." He walked toward the door. Something ugly twisted inside me. "So you just brought me here and what, now you're done? That's it?" He paused at the door. "The bond is gone, Celeste," he said quietly, resigned. "There's nothing left of it, no excuse left to punish her. Stop keeping Karis locked away like she's some inconvenience you wish never existed. Like she's me." The air left my lungs. He glanced back, distant again. "Free her, or one day you'll break in ways you can't recover from." My voice trembled. "Why do you care?" "I don't," he said. "Not anymore. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear something apart because he was too composed and I was not. The Brett I used to know used to desperately cling to me like I was his anchor. Now it felt like he was the anchor, and I was the one drifting. I just stood there, immobile, as he opened the door. Someone outside cleared their throat. "Alpha Brett, are you ready to go?" Everything inside me stalled. "Alpha?" Brett didn't look back at me again as he walked out, the title hanging behind him like one gigantic question mark. But surely I'd heard wrong. The door began to close. "Alpha." I lunged forward before I even realized I'd moved and caught it before it shut completely. "Alpha?" Curiosity roared louder than pride. I rushed after him. The hallway outside the suite was just as luxurious. Thick carpet, golden sconces, silence that screamed wealth. Brett was already walking toward the elevator, hands casually in his pockets, like being called Alpha was the most normal thing in the world. Someone walked beside him, a step behind, but I was tunnel-visioned, and nothing existed in that moment except for the man who had once held a part of my soul. Alpha. Brett. Breath unsteady, I followed him, my bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. "Brett," I snapped. He didn't turn as he pressed the elevator button. "Brett! Hey, you don't get to just—" The elevator dinged open. He stepped inside. "Don't walk away from me," I yelled, pulse screaming. That made him pause. His head dipped slightly, like he was weighing something. He finally looked at me. Not surprised, I followed, not amused, just knowing. "You always did love hierarchy more than people," he said in that infuriating flat tone. The doors began to close. "Goodbye, Celeste." "Wait," I started. A hand clamped over my mouth from behind, just as the doors slid shut. And darkness swallowed everything. Seraphina's povee. If I'd known Lucian would be here, I might have made an excuse to skip this trip entirely. Not because I hated him, goddess, I wished it were that simple, but because I felt uncertain and exposed. After the Zara bomb, I was struggling to understand the new dynamic between us. I didn't know what I wanted from him or from myself. It had barely been 2 days since I asked for space. I hadn't learned how to master the art of avoidance. Now, I could only hope I'd figure out how to handle this as it unfolded. For a moment, everything, the laughter, the sunlight, the smell of pine, blurred into background noise. His gaze was steady but cautious, as if he wasn't sure whether to smile or retreat. He looked older somehow, like our last conversation was 20 years ago, not just a couple of days. His hair was out of its usual neat bun and brushed his shoulders, a little disheveled. His usual poise was replaced with quiet fatigue. I pulled my gaze away from him and turned to Judy, forcing a smile that probably fooled no one. I didn't know he'd be here. Judy smiled, oblivious to the way my stomach had dropped. "Yeah, we invited him at the last minute. I mean, can you imagine a victory retreat without our founder?" "Right. Duh." Lucian was the one who created OTS. the one who built it from the ground up. It made sense that everyone saw him as the heart of the group. If Zara were alive, she'd probably be invited too. Ah, shit. The whole Kieran debacle had distracted me from the Lucian situation. But now, the Lucian situation had shoved the Kieran debacle to the back of my mind. Do you know what would have been amazing? If I were born human, then I could be a nun and take a vow of abstinence from men, and my life would be 1,000,000 times easier. Come on. Judy clapped her hands once, grinning. Let's get you squared away. I managed a nod, though my pulse hadn't steadied. Muscle memory took over, and I went on autopilot. My mind scrambled to reorient, to adjust to the reality of spending the next 2 days in proximity to the person I'd asked for space from. I could feel Lucian's presence like heat on the back of my neck. Now and then, when I risked a glance, I caught him stealing one too. True to my request, he kept his distance and made no attempt to speak to me. I should have been content with that, but then I heard him talking with my teammates in that his engaging tone, laughing, smiling, that same charismatic smile that had once made me feel safe. He still looked maddeningly composed. Of course he did. He was Lucian Reed. Calm, collected. The alpha who could charm his way through anything. And now I was in a shitty mood. Judy noticed first. We were sitting on a fallen log by the fire pit, slicing vegetables for the barbecue when she leaned closer, lowering her voice. Okay, spill. What's going on between you and Miss tall and brooding over there? I nearly dropped the knife. What? Don't play dumb, she said, arching a brow. You've barely looked at him since you got here, and he's been looking at you like a kicked puppy. He's not, I sighed. It's complicated. Complicated is my favorite flavor, Judy said, grinning. Come on, I know I'm not Almighty Maya Cartridge, but we're friends, right? I laughed softly. According to your mother, we're sisters. She giggled, nudging me. Exactly. So what's up? I hesitated. Heat prickled my cheeks as the words swelled against my throat, trying to burst out of their own accord. Keeping everything bottled up was exhausting. Finally, I exhaled. We broke up. Judy blinked. Oh. Then, softer. Oh, Sarah. Her expression melted into sympathy, and somehow that hurt even more than if she'd teased me. Before I could say more, someone coughed behind us. We turned toward the sound. Roxy stood there with a tray of skewers, looking guilty as sin. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she said quickly. Roxy, it's fine. I gave her a small smile. You didn't do anything wrong. Her face crumpled. Is it because of what I said? I'd never seen Roxy look so remorseful before. About his mate? I was too slow to reply, and her eyes widened. She dropped onto the log beside me, clutching the tray a little tighter. Fuck, Sarah, I was just being a bitch. I didn't mean to. Roxy? I cut her off gently. You didn't cause the breakup. You just helped me see things more clearly. I was the one who made the choice. Still, she winced, you shouldn't have heard that from me. I nodded. You're right, but that's not on you. I should have heard it from him long before you had the chance to tell me. Her eyes shimmered. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Judy raised a brow. Who are you and what have you done with our resident scorpion? Roxy shifted the tray to one hand and shot out her middle finger at Judy. That made me laugh, and the weight in my chest loosened a little, my shoulders dropping as some of the tension eased out of me. Roxy turned back to me. We're good, right? I gave her hand a reassuring pat. We're good. Judy gave me a sideways look once Roxy left. You're sure? I leaned to the side and rested my head against her shoulder, the half-chopped onions long forgotten. I'd barely scratched the surface of the mountain of emotional shit looming before me, but I really didn't want to wade through all the thoughts of grief, confusion, and hurt that kept swirling in my head. Not on this trip, at least. So I forced a smile I didn't quite feel. Yeah, I'm sure. When we rejoined the group, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Maybe Judy's knowing glances were a little too obvious, or maybe Roxy wasn't the only one who overheard our conversation. Either way, the laughter felt thinner, the air heavier, and then came Talia, bounding up with surprising enthusiasm. Okay, so plans for dinner. Lucian and Sarah are on grill duty together. I froze. What? She winked, oblivious. Yep. Oh, and I got these adorable matching aprons for you two. She produced 2 matching black aprons with King of the Grill and Queen of the Grill printed. Placed side by side, a tiny red heart connected the phrases. Talia beamed, obviously proud of herself. Couple goals, right? Judy winced. Roxy face-palmed. Lucian opened his mouth. Actually, I think I should go. It's fine, I cut in a little too sharply. Thanks, Talia. Lucian turned to me eye-searching and spoke to me for the first time today. Sarah? It's fine, I repeated, this time too brightly. Let's just get started. If he was going to leave, I wasn't going to be the reason. Because regardless of what we were now, or weren't, this trip wasn't about us. It was about OTS, the team he built, the people who looked up to him. And I had to admit, I was still one of those people. Lucian Reed might have been a flawed man, but he was an infallible leader. And that was that. As I tied the apron around my waist, I caught Judy exchanging a weighted glance with Roxy. Talia cleared her throat and continued handing out the rest of the assignments with a little less enthusiasm than before. The moment passed, but the awkwardness lingered like smoke that refused to fade. Everyone could feel it now, the undercurrent of tension thrumming faintly between us, thin, fragile, like a string pulled too tight. Lucian kept his distance, polite but restrained. When our hands brushed over the same pair of tongs, we both flinched slightly, pretending not to notice. Still, somehow, amidst the discomfort, I found a strange sense of calm. Maybe it was the forest, the company, the small flickers of normalcy. Or maybe it was simply that I'd made peace with my choice. Lucian had hurt me, yes, but not in the same way Kieran had. Lucian's flaw wasn't cruelty, it was control. His need to steer everything, to protect me, even if it meant keeping me in the dark. But after being out of control for so long, I wanted to be the one steering my own path. Even if that meant walking beside him without ever reaching for his hand again.